Chapter 1394. This was a secondary dimension. Auroras fell from the sky like fluttering ribbons, and a stream of light shuttled through them at high speed. It was the magic statue carrier of Dylan and the others. After sailing for more than a month, they had already left the control area of the three universal civilizations. Dylan and the others gradually relaxed from their initial vigilance. More than a month ago, Oathkeeper had used his mental projection to see them and then disappeared. They were all revivers of the Holy Covenant, so they had a good understanding of the effects of soul flame. They knew that Oathkeeper could only talk to them and could not lock onto their position in space, so they were not worried about exposing their coordinates. It's been so long. Counting the days, Black Star should have returned from the sanctum. Oathkeeper said that he would tell us valuable information. He should be here soon. A Beyond Grade A was playing with the furry pet on the table and casually mentioned this matter. Another person was watering the ornamental plants in the small ecological zone in the cabin. When he heard the question, he looked back and smiled. Oathkeeper seems to want to use this news to change our minds. I want to know what he will say. The revivers in the cabin were all doing their own things, and all the Beyond Grade as who had left the main universe with Dylan a month ago had not left yet. Other than special relationships, Beyond Grade as were not willing to submit to others, so no one treated Dylan as a leader. The reason why they had not parted ways yet was mainly because they were working together to deal with the risks of the secondary dimensions. After all, this place was still quite threatening to normal Beyond Grade as. Someone turned to look at Dylan. I'm quite curious. What about you? I'm not curious. Dylan closed his eyes to rest, too lazy to even open them. He snorted. Since you've chosen to leave, be more firm. You're all Beyond Grade as. Don't you have any backbone? Anyway, no matter what he says, I won't go back. Everyone laughed and was about to say something when black sparks suddenly appeared in the cabin, quickly forming Oathkeeper's mental projection. Seeing this, Dylan's brows twitched, and he slowly opened his eyes. The expressions of the other revivers also changed slightly. They stopped smiling, put down what they were doing, and stared at Oathkeeper. You're here again. Dylan narrowed his eyes. Why? Do you still want to persuade me to go back? It's up to you whether you want to return or not. I'm just here to deliver the information. Oathkeeper did not want to bother with him, and turned to look at the other curious revivers. A black flame ignited in his palm, and blurry images flashed in it, containing the information of the truth of the Sanctum revival. With a light flick of his finger, streams of sparks scattered out and merged into everyone's foreheads. The information within was directly transmitted to the other party's spiritual brain region. The sequence of events was clear at a glance. The relevant spiritual memories were opened up for inspection. The next moment, everyone received this information and was instantly dumbfounded. So the Sanctum revival isn't a one-time thing? You and Black Star have been hiding it from us. Many people's expressions changed drastically as they glared at Oathkeeper. Their expressions were indescribably ugly, as if they had just smelled incense. The choice is yours. Oathkeeper couldn't be bothered to say more. After saying that, he dispelled the mental projection and disappeared. Watching him leave, everyone's expressions changed several times. One of the revivers looked around and finally landed on the shocked Dylan. He said firmly, "Everyone, I'll go back and take a look first. See you again if fate allows it." With that, he ignored everyone's reaction and directly got out of the vehicle in a flash. He raised his hand and cast a spell, summoning a directional teleportation door. He stepped in and disappeared with the door. This became a signal, and the revivers bade farewell one after another. Those who were patient would say goodbye, while those who were impatient would leave without saying anything. There was no need to explain anything to this group of temporary companions. They were all people who had been revived before. Their motive for leaving the main universe was that they thought that the one-time Sanctum revival was no longer effective for them. This was their last life. However, only now did they know that this was just a scam set up by the Holy Covenant and Black Star. However, the reason was no longer important to them. The unlimited number of Sanctum revivals was almost eternal. In front of this benefit, there was nothing to hesitate about. Many of his companions left one after another. Very soon, the lively cabin became empty, leaving only Dylan alone. He did not care about the departure of the others at all. He was still immersed in shock as he muttered to himself, "No wonder. No wonder Black Star didn't care about us avoidance parties." It turns out that he had this trump card in his hands. The opportunity for eternal life was right in front of him, but Dylan's expression changed, and he was extremely conflicted. A few days later, in the top-floor conference room of the training base, Han Shao sat at the head of the table and looked around at the many beyond grade as present. Seeing that everyone was staring at him, he casually said, "Now that the truth of the Sanctum revival has been revealed, everyone knows the truth. Now that everyone knows the truth about the Sanctum revival, I believe there is no need for me to repeat the unnecessary explanation. Everyone should have digested this information in the past few days. The reason I gathered everyone today is to discuss the follow-up issues of the Sanctum revival. This will be an important trump card for us to fight against the World Tree." The three universal civilizations were very surprised by this and decided to continue to support it and keep it a secret from the public for the time being. Everyone present nodded silently with a subtle expression. They believed that there were surprises, but they were more shocked. Even if they used their butts to think, they could imagine how the leaders of the three universal civilizations would feel when they found out about this surprise. They had been trying to find Han Shao for the past few days, but Han Shao had temporarily left after using the Sanctum revival and could not be contacted at all. He had only returned now and publicly summoned all the Beyond Grade as in the training base. All the participating Beyond Grade as had been waiting for the meeting and immediately rushed over. No one was absent. Han Shao took in everyone's expressions, tapped his finger on the table, and chuckled. "By the way, let's gather everyone's opinions today and see if everyone is willing to continue participating in the battle. After all, from now on, participating in the battle will be linked to the treatment of the Sanctum revival. I need to record it down. There might be people who don't like this treatment, but I can't force them. After all, I'm a very democratic person." Democratic? Shameless. Everyone cursed in their hearts. Black Star had grasped this lifeline, and his right to speak had risen to a new level. It was almost as if he had the final say. Who would be willing to give up this treatment? Although they were complaining in their hearts, the Beyond Grade as present were still very honest. One after another, they could not wait to speak. "Count me in. There's no reason to give up halfway. Of course, we'll continue fighting." Everyone expressed their stance enthusiastically, indicating that they would continue to participate in the battle. Originally, a portion of the third batch of revivers did not participate in the Battle of the Interception Circle, but after seeing the substantial evidence of the unlimited number of Sanctum revivals, they all changed their words. Han Shao smiled as he watched this scene. He opened a virtual screen, pulled up the memo, and recorded the names of those who expressed their stance in front of everyone. The temptation of unlimited Sanctum revivals is indeed something that not many people can resist. The effect is similar to what I expected. A few days ago, Han Shao had received a report from Oathkeeper that the Holy Covenant revivers had also requested to come out of seclusion to participate in the battle. These few days, he had gone to deal with this matter and appeased the Holy Covenant revivers, indicating that they would only need to take action when the World Tree invaded their territory. For now, there was no need for them to come out. They were still hiding in the dark, and they only needed to accept his targeted training plan. The reason why the Holy Covenant revivers were in seclusion was partly because they were unwilling to continue getting involved in the battle between the organizations, and partly because they had a grudge against the three universal civilizations. However, they had all abandoned their original intentions and changed their minds. Although their words sounded nice, their actions were still realistic enough. The beyond grade, as who knew their own needs, basically made rational choices. Han Xiao naturally would not laugh at anything. It was just human nature. Not many people could watch others enjoy this benefit while they did not have a share. Just as everyone was expressing their stance, the door of the conference room was suddenly pulled open, interrupting the meeting. Everyone turned around and could not help but have a playful look on their faces. They saw that the revivers of the Avoidance faction who had stayed on planet Finn had all arrived and entered. The room immediately fell silent. This group of Avoidance faction who did not leave with Dylan stood by the table. Han Xiao glanced around, put on a calm expression, and casually said, "Why are you guys here? What's the matter?" Hearing this, one of the Avoidance faction stepped out from the crowd and spoke loudly as if he was the representative of everyone. "Your Excellency Black Star, after careful consideration, we have made a unanimous decision. Please allow us to join the training. We apply to participate in the battle." The beyond grade as present exchanged looks, shook their heads, and laughed. They were not surprised at all. Han Xiao smiled, nodded, and said, "As I said before, if you change your mind one day, we also welcome you to fight alongside us." With that, he snapped his fingers, and with a flash of mechanical force, the conference table suddenly moved. Mechanical particles extended, and the table slowly expanded. Everyone's seats also slid, leaving more space. New seats rose from the ground one after another. After doing this, Han Xiao casually pointed to the empty seats and chuckled. "Everyone, please take a seat." Seeing this, the group of revivers heaved a sigh of relief. They nodded and thanked him before finding empty seats to sit down. They had originally wanted to watch a group of association members stop the enemy at the front line, but after learning the truth about the Sanctum revival from Biger, everyone changed their minds overnight and decided to participate in the battle. Originally, they were still worried that Black Star would make things difficult for them, or at the very least, someone would make a few sarcastic remarks. However, they realized that this group of participants acted as if it was a matter of course, and no one mocked their choice. This made them relax. However, thinking about it, they were all the same. The big brother would not mock the second brother. Sun Hunter glanced at them and said, "Why are there only so few of you? There should be some talents, right? Where's that smelly elf king?" They, a former member of the Avoidance faction, paused and smiled helplessly. They don't want to get involved in the war and have already left the main universe. No one can contact them. Everyone was astonished. Not everyone knew about this matter. Kasuyi had concealed the news. Then they really suffered a huge loss to miss such a good thing. Sun Hunter clicked his tongue in wonder. The corners of many people's mouths curled up as they secretly mocked. In any case, they had to finish the path they had chosen. They would not feel sorry for this group of people who ran away. It was a pity that they did not know the story in Han Zhao's memories. Otherwise, they would have known that there was a suitable description for this kind of behavior. It was as if they had entered lust after 4 or 9 years. They still don't know the truth about the Sanctum revival, right? Should we chase them back? Milizaus turned around and asked. Han Xiao did not mind and pretended to be calm. Our association is not an organization that can only be entered and not left. They have the freedom to leave. There's no need to care about them. Halfway through his sentence, he suddenly paused, chuckled, and continued. Besides, didn't they come back on their own? After saying that, everyone noticed it and turned to look at the bright starry sky outside the window. They saw a teleportation gate spinning open, and streams of light landed on the training base. Soon, dense footsteps came from afar, getting closer and closer. Everyone turned to look at the open door. Under everyone's gazes, all the revivers of the avoidance faction who had run away appeared at the door and walked in one after another. Dylan was the last to leave. Kasuyi calmly took a sip of his tea. After this group of people returned, because they could not find Black Star, they contacted him one after another. He arranged for everyone to appear together today and separate from the other group that stayed behind to avoid the war. However, only he and Han Xiao knew about this matter. Yo, we were just talking about you guys. Didn't you say you were staying away from the war? Why are you back? Sun Hunter winked and said in a teasing tone. The others also had mocking expressions on their faces. Their gazes kept sweeping past Dylan, who was at the end of the team. They still remembered that Dylan was the most determined person to avoid the war. His resolute expression when he slammed the table and objected to participating in the war was still vivid in their minds. But now he was silent, expressionless, and looking straight ahead, as if he treated everyone else as air. He did not even look at anyone after entering the room. Dylan ignored Sun Hunter and looked at Han Xiao. Black Star, we hope to participate in the war. Do you agree? As soon as he said that, the others stopped talking and turned to look at Han Xiao, waiting for his decision. Han Xiao glanced at the group of people and knocked on the table. A batch of empty seats rose from the ground again. Sit. Seeing this, the group of people relaxed. They did not dare look into Han Xiao's eyes. After bowing their heads, they quickly sat down. Seeing that Han Xiao did not have any intention of talking to him, the anxiety in Dylan's heart dissipated a little. He found a seat and sat down obediently. Before he returned, he had been worried that he would be punished. After all, he had always disagreed in the past, so it was very likely that Black Star was unwilling to accept him. He was not confident and felt that he would be mocked no matter what. He did not expect Black Star to treat him the same, as if he did not care about him at all. At this moment, Sun Hunter pursed his lips and looked at Dylan with disdain. TSK, didn't you say you would never regret it? Didn't you have a deep grudge? Weren't you quite stubborn? I looked down on you. Dylan did not mind. He could not suppress his foul mouth and retorted, Do I need you to think highly of me? It's my freedom to do whatever I want. Can't I change my mind? In order to make you think highly of me, you want me to give up the chance to live forever. Who do you think you are? He had always done what he wanted. If he cared about the opinions of others, he would not have died so tragically in history. After a battle in his heart, he finally chose the chance to live forever. Although the hatred of the past was engraved in his heart, it did not blind his rationality. He was not willing to fight for the 3 universal civilizations. Hatred was one factor, and the other factor was that there were no benefits. Now that the truth of the Sanctum revival was right in front of him, he naturally knew what was more important. There were infinite possibilities as long as he was alive, and the contempt of others was not an obstacle to him making the right decision. Humph, I'll kill you one day. Sun Hunter snorted and turned around, too lazy to argue with this guy. The others also retracted their gazes. For the sake of important benefits, not many beyond grade as would be affected by the opinions of others. It was fine to mock them in their hearts, but they could understand the choice of these people. There was nothing to look down on. Han Xiao ignored them and waited for everyone to quiet down before continuing to talk about business. Not long after, this simple meeting ended, and everyone dispersed with their own thoughts. Just as Dylan was about to leave, Han Xiao's voice suddenly came from behind. Stay for a while. Everyone paused and looked back at the calm Han Xiao playfully. They quickened their pace and left, deliberately leaving some space for themselves. Soon, only the 2 of them were left in the room. Dylan's expression froze. He turned back to look at Han Xiao, not daring to look into Han Xiao's indifferent eyes. What's the matter? Han Xiao tilted his head and pretended to be confused. You incited the members to leave the association. Don't tell me you think this matter is over just like that? What do you want to do? Dylan's heart skipped a beat. Although he had a foul mouth, that was because of his personality. It was not that he was afraid of nothing. However, Han Shao did not answer immediately. Instead, he said to himself, he just said, "Your experience is indeed very tragic, but this is not an excuse for your incitement. Are you the only one here who has a grudge with the 3 universal civilizations? You're the only one. I don't care about your hatred. That's your private matter. How you deal with it has nothing to do with me, and I don't sympathize with you. You deserve to be beaten to death. I only care about whether my plan can be carried out as usual and whether the battle can develop smoothly. You've obstructed me many times, so you should pay a price. I've already put down my grudge for the time being and am willing to come back and work for the 3 universal civilizations. What else do you want?" Dylan felt even more uneasy as he said in a deep voice, "What does it have to do with me whether you put down your grudge or not? Do you think I'll spoil you just because you've overcome your difficulties? If you didn't have the chance to live forever, would you have come back? I only care about whether you can play a role." Han Shao was not going to fall for it. He slowly said, "But you took the initiative to come back. You did make the right choice. No path is dark, so I'll give you a chance. What are you doing?" Dylan clenched his fists and carefully retreated. "If you didn't come back today, I would have hunted you down and not let you have the chance to encounter the World Tree. I believe your companions would have been happy to expose your route. After you died, I would have sent you to the underworld and worked for the battle. I would have never let you free. However, I'm very satisfied that you came back yourself, so I won't kill you. I'll still send an unstable factor like you to the underworld, but I promise that after the war ends, I'll remove your hero spirit identity and use the Sanctum Revival to return you to normal. You'll still have eternal life in the future." As he spoke, Han Shao slowly stood up, rubbed his fists, and narrowed his eyes. "I hope you'd better fight back. You don't speak human language every day. I've long wanted to beat you up and fix your mouth." Chapter 1395. What do you think Black Star is planning to do by keeping that annoying bastard? The many beyond grade as who walked out of the conference room left along the corridor. Sun Hunter's tiny body floated in midair as he followed the crowd. Kant shrugged and fiddled with the thrusters on the back of Manison's Lord's avatar. He said nonchalantly, "It's definitely nothing good." Secret Master looked down at the light of the enchantment tattoo and said calmly, "I did a divination just now. Dylan's luck is dark, and there seems to be a bloody disaster. Looks like Black Star is going to settle the score with him and teach him a lesson. This guy deserves to be beaten up." Sun Hunter smacked his lips and chuckled. Just as they were guessing, a loud explosion came from behind. Bang! A strong shockwave suddenly came from behind, causing everyone to stagger. The Beyond Grade as turned around in surprise and saw that the corridor they came from had already exploded into pieces. The center of the explosion was the conference room, and it had already turned into a huge hole. The change in the internal and external pressure burst out with an astonishing suction force, sucking out a large pile of debris. 2 streams of light intertwined with each other and shot into the sky, instantly rushing into the universe. The group looked up in surprise and saw that psionic energy was shooting out from the sky. Han Shao was already fighting with Dylan. His black robe danced in the wind, and dark blue psionic energy shot out, clashing with the spells that Dylan was constantly releasing in midair, exploding with dazzling light. "Whoa, they're fighting! Hit him hard, Black Star, I support you mentally. Count me in. Help me punch him a few times." Be it the members of the association or the direct descendants of the civilization, they all gathered back and looked up at the 2 people fighting in the sky through the open hole. With Dylan's popularity, no one went up to help him. Everyone looked like they were watching a show. Their faces were filled with schadenfreude as they watched this annoying fellow get beaten up. In outer space, Dylan kept trying to pull away, but Han Xiao kept sticking to him. Because it was a close-range attack, Dylan could not react in time and was flustered. His face was punched a few times, and his fair face swelled up slightly with bruises. Dylan hurriedly took out a magic artifact, and his magic power circulated along a complicated circuit. He released the secret technique of the elves, and slender blue-green ribbons of light quickly extended out. They were densely packed, and the light almost condensed into substance. They wrapped around Han Zhao's hands and feet, flashing with countless elven inscriptions. Taking advantage of the short control time, Dylan quickly activated the short-range blink enchantment. With a flash of light, he pulled a large distance away. He hurriedly raised his hand to cast a spell and built a long-range teleportation gate. He didn't want to sit and wait for his death. He hadn't fought with Han Xiao yet, so he just wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. However, just as a spark appeared on the spatial gate, Han Xiao tore apart his control spell and blew up his magic artifact. He instantly appeared beside Dylan with a void hyperdrive. The next moment, the elbow, which was condensed with psionic energy, smashed into Dylan's magic shield. The powerful force instantly shattered it into fragments of light, and the iron elbow smashed into Dylan's chest with unstoppable force. Dong! A dull vibration spread out from the point of impact. Dylan's eyes bulged, and he felt a huge force almost squashing his organs. His chest caved in, and his back suddenly bulged, breaking a large number of bones. Cough! Blood rushed to his throat, and Dylan could not help but cough out a mouthful of blood. Enduring the pain, he quickly activated the Phase Void spell and instantly avoided Han Zhao's subsequent headbutt. However, before he could use the opportunity to cast a spell, a mecha's palm wrapped in a pale white light quickly attacked him. The force field emitted by the phase stabilization device instantly neutralized his spell, and the large hand immediately grabbed the entity and grabbed his throat. Then, a storm of punches quickly enlarged in Dylan's vision. Bang! 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 In the blink of an eye, Dylan had lost count of how many punches he had taken on his face. He felt as if his head had become a sandbag that had been crazily hit by someone. There were dents in his head, and his entire body was deflated. Waves of force passed through his skin, muscles, and bones, and went deep into his brain. His brain was almost shaken into a foam-like substance. "Get away from me!" Dylan gritted his teeth, and his magic power flowed into his mind along a specific circuit, stimulating his mind. The dizziness was removed, and he regained his focus on casting spells. Without another word, he raised his hand and cast 5 instant spells. As the colorful magic light flowed, the 5 spells formed a combo. The shield that specialized in defending against melee attacks was regenerated, barely blocking a few combo attacks. Then, he used an escape spell to get rid of the control. Then, he used a high-level immobilization spell to stop Han Xiao for an instant. Then, the shockwave of his magic power pushed him away, and he used Starlight Escape to pull away again. After finally getting a chance to catch his breath, Dylan hurriedly activated the secret healing technique that the elves were good at to heal his injuries. However, after suffering a series of heavy blows, his originally handsome face was now swollen like a pig's head with a crooked mouth. The swelling speed was very slow. Although Dylan is annoying, he still has some ability. It's a pity that his opponent this time is someone out of the norm. He's definitely in for it. The Beyond Grade as below watched the show while whispering. Peak Beyond Grade A mages were famous for having a lot of means. As an arcanist who had left his name in history, Dylan naturally knew countless spells. Unfortunately, these moves could only allow him to survive for a little longer and had no other use. They were both Peak Beyond Grade As, but Han Zhao's energy rank far exceeded his. Seeing that Dylan was beaten up, everyone was excited. If not for their status, some people might have cheered loudly. If not for the fact that they knew Han Zhao's background and saw the melee suppression just now, Everyone would have thought that Dylan was being beaten up by a pugilist. At this time, Han Zhao's energy surged, and he shattered the high-level immobilization rune. He raised his hand and summoned the dimensional army Bach. The Black Army instantly surged out, and the scene finally changed to that of a mechanic. Dylan's heartstrings trembled, and he did not dare to be distracted anymore. He quickly chanted incantations, and powerful forbidden spells left his hands one after another, turning into magic cannons that bombarded the endless mechanical army. In the black sea of machinery, colorful but fatal explosions burst out. However, the performance of Han Zhao's mechanical soldiers was already extremely shocking, and with the support of his mechanical force, Dylan could not cut the grass at all. The hardness of the small soldiers was as if they had activated nightmare mode, and most of the attacks were blocked by the shields and armor of the mechanical army. After switching to the mechanics group fighting mode, the battle entered the rhythm that Han Zhao was familiar with. Dylan was surrounded and could not escape no matter how hard he tried. The mechanical army fought back and forth like a rag wiping away a stubborn stain. After enduring the impact time and time again, Dylan's aura slowly slid down from its peak and gradually weakened. He tried to open a stable teleportation gate time and time again, but all of them were scattered by the fluctuations of the spatial device. He was already at the end of his rope, struggling to drown in the black sea of machinery. With his endless magic, he only lasted for half a day. Finally, the flickering magic shield could no longer withstand the attacks of the apostle weapons and shattered. Chi. The next moment, laser beams pierced through his body, leaving charred wounds. His body was almost turned into a beehive. However, although mages were fragile, the life force of a peak beyond grade A was not so easy to destroy. He was still on the verge of death. Han Zhao waved his hand, and had a few apostle weapons escort the heavily injured Dylan into the broken conference room. They came to the front of the many beyond grade, as who had been watching the battle. Everyone looked at Dylan's miserable state and grinned. Dylan's personality really did not have any friends. Sun Hunter floated to Dylan's head, hugged a tuft of hair, and pulled it out. "Aren't you very arrogant? Show me your foul mouth again. He was beaten up by you. I hope he can learn to keep a low profile in the future." Biger shook his head. Aurora could not bear it. She grabbed a ball of life energy and asked, "Do you need me to treat him?" Han Zhao waved his hand and said casually, "There's no need. There's no need. I was just about to kill him." As soon as he said that, the atmosphere changed slightly. Everyone's smiles disappeared and their faces were filled with surprise. They had always thought that Han Zhao was just teaching Dylan a lesson, so they were watching the show happily. However, now that they knew that Han Zhao wanted his life, the nature was different. Everyone's expressions became serious. "You're going to kill him? Although this guy is quite annoying, it's not to the extent of taking his life, right?" Sun Hunter said with a doubtful tone. Olu agreed and said in surprise, "This guy is quite strong. Since he's willing to participate in the battle, why kill him? Besides, you'll have to revive him sooner or later. Isn't this unnecessary? Don't tell me you don't plan to revive him?" All of a sudden, many people spoke up to express their opposition. Although they hated him, most of the beyond grade as did not want to kill Dylan. It was not because they had any relationship with him, but because it involved their own interests. Although the Sanctum Revival was their lifeline, no one wanted to see Black Star use this to take from the beyond grade as and kill them as he pleased. Han Zhao looked at everyone and was not surprised at all. The truth of the Sanctum Revival was a double-edged sword. The beyond grade as tolerated his control because he was strong enough, but it did not mean that they had become obedient babies. From the beginning to the end, these beyond grade as were a group of untamed beasts, eyeing him covetously. The chance of eternal life was very tempting. Some beyond grade as could put down their pride, but they would not completely give up their dignity and bottom line. It was best for everyone to live in peace, and everyone was willing to listen to his orders within the bottom line. However, if he went overboard, the beyond grade as would not be indifferent. The starting point of participating in the battle in exchange for a revival slot was to unite against the outside world. It was a reasonable request, so everyone could accept it. However, it did not mean that the beyond grade as would obey all orders unconditionally. Although everyone cherished the chance of eternal life, they would not really become subordinates and be completely controlled by others. Once the truth of the Sanctum revival was made public, it would no longer be a private thing but a public interest in the eyes of the beyond grade as. It could be controlled by a certain person, but they could not tolerate complete privatization. If they wanted to use this channel to seek absolute control over the beyond grade as, the result would most likely be the beyond grade as working together to snatch the control of the Sanctum revival. At most, they would fight to the death. They would either fight alone or rope in a group of beyond grade as to deal with the rebels. This would be the path of the Celestial Star Alliance. Han Shao was well aware of this, but he did not intend to control everyone. He slowly said, "Dylan has destroyed the internal unity many times and is an unstable factor. This time, he brought his people to leave the association, which has already proved his instability. What if he accidentally leaks the information? Seeing that he took the initiative to come back, I will reduce his punishment. However, for the sake of the war, I plan to send him to the underworld for the time being. After the war is over, he will enjoy the normal revival treatment. Everyone, you can be a witness to prevent me from going back on my word in the future." Hearing this, everyone fell silent. They exchanged looks and pondered. What they objected to was killing for no reason, not that they could not kill. They felt that Black Star's words made sense. Thinking back to Dylan's performance, it might be a good choice to let this foul-mouthed guy enter the underworld for a period of time. The world would be half peaceful then. Thinking of this, everyone retreated and did not continue to stop him. Seeing this, Dylan was in complete despair. He coughed out a large mouthful of charred blood, and his aura withered. "Since no one has any objections, I'll take action." Seeing this, Han Shao turned around and gestured to his troops. "Poochie." The next moment, Psionic Prime stabbed his spear into the back of Dylan's head and exited, destroying his last bit of life force. Hela immediately raised her hand and captured Dylan's soul. Then, she disappeared from the spot with Aurora and entered the underworld to modify Dylan's spirit body. Han Shao looked at Kasuyi, pointed at the hole in the ceiling, and said, "Don't forget to get someone to fix the conference room." With that, he changed into the king and teleported away. Seeing the mechanical army dragging Dylan's corpse away, the beyond grade as present were shocked. After thinking about it for a while, everyone felt that Black Star had deliberately killed Dylan in front of them to establish his authority. Black Star's subtext was that although he did not want to use the revival quota to control the beyond grade as, he did not want everyone to think that they could do whatever they wanted with the Sanctum revival. He wanted to show that he would not pay for the mistakes of others. Originally, everyone was quite excited to receive the unlimited revival quota promised by Black Star through participating in the battle. Now that they had finally calmed down, some of the dangerous thoughts that had sprouted in the dark were put on the reins again. The group calmed down and dispersed with their own thoughts. On the other side, in the underworld dimension, Dylan's soul floated in midair. Hela and Aurora were mobilizing the power of the underworld and injecting it into Dylan's body to modify the form of his spirit body. The 9 hero spirit kings of the underworld were watching from the side. With a flash of light, Han Shao teleported over. The moment he appeared, he attracted Dylan's furious gaze. "Black Star, I took the initiative to come back to participate in the battle, but you killed me. You and I are irreconcilable." Dylan cursed and gritted his teeth. Han Shao did not mind and clicked his tongue. "You looked like you were half dead just now, but you look so energetic after you're dead. You're shameless. You're shameless." I'm really blind to believe you. Before he could finish, Hela muted him expressionlessly. No matter how Dylan opened and closed his mouth, he could not make a sound. Han Shao shrugged and turned to look at Sorokin and the others. This guy will be the 10th hero spirit king in the future. Teach him more and let him reflect on what it means to cause trouble with his mouth. With his seniority rising again, Sorokin was in a good mood. How strong is this guy? Peak beyond grade A mage, the former holy king of the elves. His combat strength is quite good. You might not even be his match. He's only a little weaker than me, Han Shao said casually. The quality of the rookies this time is not bad, Sorokin replied like an old man. Han Shao ignored him and turned to look at Dylan, who was roaring silently. His eyes flashed. This way, the hero spirit king of the underworld would become one of the 10 Vajras. With such a lively guy, Sorokin and the others' lives would probably be even more colorful. Without looking at Hela and her sister's hero spirit modification ceremony, Han Shao opened the interface and looked at the mission list. Dylan's Beyond Grade A challenge mission was shining brightly. Mage. I wonder what ability I'll get. Chapter 1396. On the other side, many direct Beyond Grade As left the venue together, still thinking about Dylan's death. Black Star is really domineering. He killed a peak Beyond Grade A right in front of us. Reeve clicked her tongue and curled her lip. He wants to set an example. Dylan was unlucky to be chosen as the target, but he deserved it. Claudia looked straight ahead and said with a calm tone, I saw those revivers running away trembling in fear. Isn't Black Star afraid of scaring them away? If they run again, they'll follow in Dylan's footstep. Plus, are they willing to leave? Claudia shook his head. At this moment, Olu stroked his chin with a worried expression and said in a low voice, Black Star controls this channel and used benefits to tie up almost all the Beyond Grade As. The association's power is already too big to be shaken. I'm afraid the problem of the super imbalance can no longer be solved. Hearing this, the hearts of the direct descendants trembled. They were worried about the future of the 3 universal civilizations. It was now a time of war, so Black Star provided revival services to the advanced civilizations. However, in the long run, if they got rid of the pressure of the foreign enemy, they did not know if Black Star would still be willing to sell the revival slots. At that time, the direct descendants might lose the benefits of the Sanctum revival. The difference between the individual strength of the two sides would become greater and greater. The association had an independent political status, possessed astonishing strength, and had the merits and reputation of participating in the war. It would be difficult for the 3 universal civilizations to do anything else. They had dug a hole for themselves, and they had to jump into it even if they had tears in their eyes. No one knew how the upper echelons could suppress such a huge monster. I'm afraid the only way to break out of this situation is to develop the Sanctum revival ourselves. It's a pity that I don't know how long it will take. Olu sighed. Now that the Sanctum revival had an even more fatal attraction, some of the direct descendants in the crowd were also tempted. After all, the treatment of the two was worlds apart. While everyone was worried, Hilbert did not say anything. His eyes kept flashing. As a retiree who had completed his service and thought that he had fulfilled his duty to the 3 universal civilizations, he was very interested in the treatment of the association. Compared to the Sanctum revival, the retirement treatment that he had sacrificed his life for was not worth mentioning. Although he had the patience to wait for the 3 universal civilizations to study the Sanctum revival, with his understanding of the 3 universal civilizations, he knew that this would not be a free lunch. The way he saw it, the 3 universal civilizations would probably set some conditions as restrictions, such as continuing to serve the civilization. However, this was a situation where there were no competitors. Now, with the association's lenient Sanctum revival as a comparison, Hilbert felt that even if the three universal civilizations really created the Sanctum Revival, they would most likely have to lower their prices and not set conditions that were too harsh. The existence of the association forced the three universal civilizations to improve their treatment. Thinking of this, Hilbert glanced at the crowd with a disapproving look. It was really funny that this group of people were still here worrying about the country and the people, but they didn't know that the existence of the association was also their good news. Fighting for the benefit of the entire Beyond Grade A class. He really has been carrying out the mission of the association. Hilbert's eyes flickered with admiration. Since he had already retired, joining the association wasn't a bad choice. 2 days later, in the army commander's office, Han Shao sat on a wide chair, swiping the virtual screen casually to check the reactions of the various Beyond Grade as over the past 2 days. He was quite satisfied. After he revealed the truth of the Sanctum Revival, the morale of the Beyond Grade as was high. Originally, they were more or less relaxed, but now they were even tighter. Their fighting spirit was unprecedentedly high, and even their training was harder. Although only a reasonable request to be united against the outside world can stimulate such cohesion, it's enough. Han Shao knocked on the armrest of the chair and pondered. He did not pursue the so-called absolute control as long as he achieved his goal. Therefore, he did not have the intention of taming a portion of the Beyond Grade as. His attitude so far was enough. With the temptation of benefits, and with Dylan as an example, there was no need to continue using methods. Han Shao suddenly thought of something and chuckled. This should be the most united Beyond Grade as in history. It would be great if they could stay united forever. As he said that, he shook his head and laughed. After all, it was an unrealistic fantasy. Internal divisions and different ideals, only interests were eternal. It was destined that only interests could bind everyone. Oh, it could not be said that everyone was attracted. Almost all the living Beyond Grade as had been attracted, but there were still exceptions. Pangan's group of Avengers had not contacted the Holy Covenant and had not expressed any intention of returning to participate in the battle. The civilization of this group of people was destroyed, and their hatred was much deeper than Dylan's. They had long decided to sacrifice their lives for the cause of revenge. Although the Sanctum Revival was tempting, it did not make them give up on revenge. The main reason was that they knew their limit. They knew that as long as they did not give up on revenge, Black Star would not revive them and continue to cause trouble. Pangan did not want to come back and implicate the association, so he simply ignored them. The front lines did not lack these few combatants, and Han Shao did not want to revive these troublesome fellows, so he let them be. He did not specifically call them back, not wanting to give them a way out. Tisk, you're quite determined. I hope you guys can keep it up. Han Shao curled his lips. This group of Avengers had a firm goal and was not tempted by the Sanctum Revival. However, with Han Zhao's status, he no longer had any admiration for this. Everyone had their own ambitions. In his eyes, there was no difference between Pangan and Dylan's choice. He was satisfied that this group of people was tactful and did not cause him any trouble. Sitting in this position, he had too many things to take care of. External wars, class interests, and dealing with the three universal civilizations. He did not have the time to spoil others. Everything was guided by the goal. Whoever caused trouble for him, he would not hesitate to deal with them. All difficulties and reasons were empty. If he wanted to understand the difficulties of others, others would not understand him first. Therefore, for the past 2 days, Dylan had been cursing in the underworld, and Han Shao could not be bothered to talk to him. Previously, Han Shao had deliberately promised in front of everyone that he would let him go in the future. Only after getting everyone's supervision did he execute him, which made this guy have thoughts. Therefore, no matter how much Dylan jumped around, as long as he had this core, this guy would still obediently work. There was no need to waste his breath. However, this guy did provide me with an interesting ability. Han Xiao calmed himself down and opened the interface to look at the skill list. His expression was a little strange. 2 days ago, he had already settled the mission rewards. He did not know if it was because Harrison had used up all the luck he had accumulated during this period of time, but this time, he did not get anything good from touching Ding Pan Long. They were all ordinary skills except for one of them, taunting habit. After activating the skill, your words are more likely to be misunderstood by the other party. Minus 50% favorability increase efficiency, plus 100% favorability decrease efficiency. When you communicate with the enemy in battle, the enemy has a greater chance of treating you as the target of their attacks. The chance depends on charm, luck, and favorability. The lower the chance, the easier it is to become the target of their hatred. No cost. It can be activated for at least 3 minutes after activation. No cooldown. No wonder this guy is so annoying. Could it be that he has never turned off this skill before? Every time he saw the introduction of this ability and thought of Dylan's daily behavior, Han Xiao could not help but fall into deep thought. Was it Dylan's habit of having a foul mouth that formed this ability, or was it this ability that developed Dylan's habit of having a foul mouth? This was a question of whether the chicken or the egg came first. Putting these factors aside, Han Xiao was actually quite satisfied with the effect of the skill alone. Taunting skills were not common. Instead, they were rather rare in the galaxy. The biggest difficulty for players when fighting bosses was that intelligent creatures did not have a rigid aggro mechanism. If they wanted to pull monsters and taunt them, they could only use tactical cooperation. There was basically no rough and simple force taunting. The most common ability to attract aggro was the mental guidance of mages or psychics, hinting at who the enemy was going to attack, but it was often resisted by mental toughness. The vast universe is really full of strange things. Even the chat tactic has a proper skill bonus. I have to use it more in the future. Han Zhao's eyes twitched. My style is becoming more and more like a qualified main tank. I have a feeling that if this continues, my title as the chief mechanic of Galaxy will become the #1 meat shield in the universe sooner or later. Chapter 1397. On the other side, in the Supercluster Alliance conference room. Sanctum Revival. What a terrifying power. The 3 universal civilizations are probably having a hard time right now. Compared to the heavy atmosphere of the 3 universal civilizations leaders, the supercluster leaders were rather happy. As the rulers of the explored universe, the 3 universal civilizations were hostile to all existences that could shake their rule. The Supercluster Alliance, on the other hand, hoped that some factors that could affect the current situation would appear. Originally, Black Star had dragged the association to this point with a one-time Sanctum Revival. Now that the true effect of the Sanctum Revival was revealed, the Beyond Grade A association became countless times more troublesome. The more unhappy the 3 universal civilizations were, the happier the Supercluster Alliance would be. Black Star has obtained an independent political position from the 3 universal civilizations, and the treatment he receives is quite high. With Black Star's methods and the power of the association, the Galactic Society might form a stable 3-pole structure in the future. We, the 3 universal civilizations, and the association will balance each other. This is good news for us. The Star Arc Civilization's leader pondered and said, "It should be a pseudo-3-pole structure. We're still a little lacking compared to the 3 universal civilizations. However, the association has the Sanctum Revival, and we have a lot of resources. If we cooperate more closely, we won't have to be afraid of the suppression of the 3 universal civilizations. The Galactic Society will no longer be under their control," someone corrected with a smile. One of the Moto 3 kings said in a muffled voice, "It's too early to say this. The premise is that the three universal civilizations win this war. Otherwise, it's all empty talk. That's true. We can't be happy too early with the enemy in front of us. Someone nodded in agreement. This time, the Star Arc civilization's leader knocked on the table. There are still about 11 years before the World Tree invades our territory. At that time, we'll see if we should evacuate from the explored universe. This time is enough for us to make preparations. Keep it a secret and don't let others know about our plan in advance. Hearing this, everyone nodded. The Supercluster Alliance had always been considering the possibility of using the war to migrate. This was a plan that had been decided long ago. During the Interception Circle War, they had secretly started to build secret stargates in their own civilizations to connect to the supercluster civilizations at the border. Once they started to migrate, they could directly reach the migration point from their own territory. At the same time, under the excuse of taking refuge, most of the population had been gathered and managed. As long as the plan was activated, the migration would be highly efficient. In addition, a lot of resources had been secretly stored. Some shipyards directly under the Federation had been secretly producing long-distance starships during the Interception Circle War, preparing for the long-distance migration. Everything was being prepared. The Supercluster Alliance's plan was to start after the World Tree invaded their territory. At that time, they would observe the battle and decide whether to run or not. If the three universal civilizations are defeated, Black Star's group will definitely not die with them. They'll definitely evacuate. By then, we might have a chance to take over the Beyond Grade A Association, someone whispered softly. The Star Arc civilization's leader rubbed his fingers and shook his head. You can't say that. If we migrate to another area, we will become the new rulers. An existence like the association will also become a threat to us. Therefore, if the three universal civilizations explode, it's best if we don't have any contact with the association. It's not bad to live our own lives. These words had the feeling of let's split up and go our separate ways. You go back to your quicksand river, and I'll go back to my Gao Laozhuang. Everyone present could not help but laugh. Although everyone was envious of the association's Beyond Grade as and the Sanctum Revival Channel, which was a powerful force to defend against foreign enemies, they knew that they would not have the chance to obtain these benefits. The Supercluster Alliance did not have the confidence of the three universal civilizations, and they were even more afraid of the Beyond Grade A Association taking over. After all, their strength was weaker than the three universal civilizations. If they entered a migration period without legal restrictions, the Beyond Grade as who could continuously revive would have the power to overthrow their regime. Therefore, if everyone had to evacuate one day, parting ways would make them feel more at ease. Speaking of which, Black Star is really a talent. He successfully played the three universal civilizations once. The current situation has his shadow behind it. In just a few decades, the Beyond Grade as have such strength, breaking the rigid situation. It's not easy. The Star Arc civilization's leader sighed softly. His tone was filled with admiration and fear. Although their relationship with Black Star often changed, from a personal point of view, the Star Arc civilization's leader and most of the supercluster leaders present mostly admired Black Star. Everyone had carefully read Black Star's files. If they had not witnessed everything with their own eyes, they would not have been able to imagine that a country bumpkin from a surface civilization had only used 100 years or so to rise from the bottom all the way to the top stage. It was a pity that such a character was not born in their civilization. If not for the fact that planet Aquamarine was protected by the Black Star, they would have dissected this planet to see why there were three Beyond Grade as on this planet. Furthermore, they were not ordinary Beyond Grade as. What was the probability of this happening? The Star Arc civilization's leader changed into a comfortable position and sighed. I have no other hope for the association now. I just hope that they can sell us more revival slots. Speaking of which, there's no limit to the number of Sanctum revivals. Will Black Star lower the price for us? Everyone tilted their heads and fell into deep thought. In the training base, the Calamity Grade combat training ground, energy surged and light flashed. 5 figures surrounded Hadavi, and all sorts of attacks smashed onto his body, exploding into light fragments that filled the sky. They could only leave faint marks on his tough body, but they were unable to break through his defense. The continuous sound of explosions was mixed with Hardaway's maniacal laughter. Ha 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 ha. It's useless, useless, useless. Your attacks don't hurt at all. They're much worse than His Excellency Black Star's apostle weapons. It's impossible to break through my defense. Just listening to his confident tone, it seemed like he was extremely brave, fighting 1 against 5. However, upon closer inspection, the 5 Calamity Grades were beating Hardaway up like kicking a rubber ball. In the spectator stands in the sky, many Calamity Grades looked down at the shaking training ground with strange expressions. He can still be so arrogant after being beaten up. Looks like he's learned the essence of an army commander. This guy is indeed a Black Star Guard who has followed His Excellency Black Star for decades. His tankiness is definitely from the same lineage. Everyone chatted casually. The Black Star Corps had once harvested hundreds of Beyond Grade A seeds, so most of the spectators were members of the army. However, they were not only there to watch the show but also to line up to beat Hardaway up. After decades of training by Han Shao, Hardaway's hardening Esper ability had been developed to an astonishing level. He was used to being beaten up by Beyond Grade A apostle weapons, and normal Calamity Grades were already like tickles to him. Even slightly weaker Calamity Grades would not be able to break through his defense. Therefore, Hardaway became the human punching bag of the training base. Many Calamity Grade students were willing to use him to test how far away they were from a Beyond Grade A. As long as they could beat Hardaway up, it would prove that they were half a step away from the Calamity Grade. The beating continued for quite a while before the 5 attackers stopped. Hadavi immediately got up from the ground and pretended to pat the non-existent dust off his body. He waved his finger at the 5 of them and snorted with an expression that was asking for a beating. That's it. I don't feel anything yet. Let's train some more. Try to make me want to die next time. Why do you always have to say such ambiguous words? A Calamity Grade wiped his sweat and could not help but complain. Is this the culture of your Black Star Corps? If the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. Another person agreed. Sylvia, who was participating in the attack, was unhappy and said to her companions, "You can play around, but don't make fun of my dear army commander." Hearing this, Hardaway looked at her, patted his chest, and pretended to be disdainful. "You quit your job as the chief administrative official and have been training in seclusion for so long. Why haven't you improved much? I think you should stop training here. You definitely won't be able to become a Beyond Grade A." Hearing this, Sylvia turned around with a look of disdain. "You have the cheek to say that? With your single ability, you'll be at the bottom of the Beyond Grade A. So what if I'm at the bottom? At least I have the ticket to eternal life." Hardaway looked like a dead pig that was not afraid of boiling water. Ever since the truth of the Sanctum revival was revealed, such words could no longer pierce his heart. In order to enjoy the Sanctum revival, he did not even play his favorite Wayne card. Logie had called him several times, but he had reluctantly rejected him. Speaking of which, the number of people playing cards had decreased by 99% recently. Only Logie was still pulling people in, but the frequency had also decreased a lot. People would often see Logie training in the Magic Training Ground. His training time had increased by 10 times compared to before, because of the low base. This was a rare sight that only appeared once in a decade. Many of the army officers who knew him were shocked and encouraged. They were all full of motivation. "Even Logie is working hard. What right do you have to be lazy? This time, a few more calamity grades jumped down from the sky and landed on the field. Alright, let's stop chatting. We're still queuing up. It's our turn. Hardaway, do you want to take a break? Hardaway patted his chest and said casually, What break? What's there to rest for? These people are useless. I'm thirsty. Come fight me. I already said, don't be ambiguous. The group roared. Just as the group of calamity grades were sparring, in the psychic training room inside the training base, Phaidon, who was immersed in training, suddenly opened his eyes, and a stream of light flashed in his eyes. In that instant, he seemed to have broken through some invisible boundary. A tremor from the depths of his cells started from his brain and slowly spread throughout his body inch by inch. It was as if every cell was crying out in joy and desire. Then, the cells in his body slowly became restless. Like water that was being heated, the temperature kept rising and gradually boiling. This feeling, I'm going to level up? Fu Ding was overjoyed. He would not be wrong about the feeling of his life evolving. Different from his previous promotion, the feeling this time was dozens of times stronger, causing his body to tremble uncontrollably. His psychic energy also surged out uncontrollably, sweeping back and forth in the room like a storm. At this moment, the soul swapper that he was carrying with him suddenly sensed something. It vibrated at a high frequency, and circles of faint black ripples spread out like ripples. When it touched the psychic power, it actually fused subtly. The psychic power that was originally as invisible and colorless as air seemed to have been drawn with a brush. Its edges were dyed black, and it showed a flowing trajectory. Before Fu Ding could be shocked, he realized that his psychic energy seemed to have entered an unknown area. Countless voices from his soul swarmed over. Fu Ding screamed in pain, feeling as if his head was about to explode. Amidst the pain, a piece of location information appeared in his mind. He realized that he had vaguely sensed an unknown existence, and a strong intuition was guiding him. The path to ascension was there. It was a pity that Han Xiao did not see it at this time. Otherwise, he would have most likely lamented that a treasure that had been covered in dust had reappeared. He was very familiar with this path. As expected of a child blessed by the heavens, even the promotion mission was different. If they were there, he would definitely interview Fu Ding and ask him what it was like to be one of the 3,000 faces of the goddess of luck. Chapter 1398. You said that not only did you sense the opportunity to ascend, but the soul swapper also mutated, causing your psychic power to mutate? In the private workshop, Han Xiao turned around and looked at Fu Ding with a strange expression. That's right, I was also very surprised. My soul connection has increased by a level, and part of the soul swapper's characteristics have been added to my psychic power. Also, I vaguely sensed the existence of a secondary dimension, and my intuition guided me there. Fu Ding shook his head helplessly. What's with that helpless expression of yours? You think it's troublesome to have a fortuitous encounter? Is this what it means to be the pride of the heavens? Han Xiaoxin complained in his mind and pondered. Speaking of which, he had used Bold Explorer to look at the origin of the soul swapper before. It was not that rare and was a man-made product. However, it might have formed a connection with a certain secondary dimension when it mutated into a space wonder. He guessed that once a person qualified to ascend to the beyond grade A realm, they would be able to activate this hidden benefit. The possibility was quite high. It was no wonder that the soul swapper was so eager for Fu Ding's favor. It turned out that it saw an opportunity to unlock its new position on Fu Ding. Han Xiaoxin injected Fu Ding with a needle while he was at it. The main reason Fu Ding came over to report was to receive his physical examination. After the needle was inserted, the combat information popped up on the interface. Han Xiao took a look and realized that Fu Ding had a new energy attribute that involved the soul. At the same time, he had two new talents. One was the new bonus from the Soul Swapper, which increased his psychic power and a series of attributes. The other talent was a question mark and was still in a gray frozen state. A person sitting at home and a talent coming from the sky. TSK, what kind of world is this? Han Xiao felt sour in his heart. He coughed dryly and said, since your intuition guided you to that secondary dimension, you should go and take a look. Is the guidance you received a direction or specific coordinate? Coordinates. Fu Ding nodded in response. Oh, that's convenient. We don't have to spend too much time on the road. However, most people have a sense of direction. Your coordinates should be the hidden information record of the Soul Swapper. Let me pack up and we'll set off. With that said, Han Xiao prepared to put away the technology in his hands and summon the vehicle. But at this moment, Fu Ding shook his head, expressing his refusal. Black Star, I have a feeling that this is my personal training. If you follow me, I won't feel any danger. I'll go alone. Han Xiao paused and muttered to himself. Since that's what you want, that's fine. I'll give you a set of kings, and you can bring another set of thrones. If you encounter any problems that you can't solve, just ask me for help. Seeing that Fu Ding still wanted to say something, Han Xiao waved his hand and interrupted him. You're my good friend. I can't let you take the risk without any backup. This is my bottom line. All right then. Fu Ding smiled helplessly. Han Xiao took out the corresponding equipment and a small vehicle specially used for secondary dimensions, letting the mechanical assistant bring it to the departure point. After Fu Ding thanked him, he followed along. Watching Fu Ding's back disappear, Han Xiao looked away and shook his head lightly. To a calamity grade, the secondary dimension was still quite dangerous. Han Xiao was worried about Fu Ding's safety and originally wanted to accompany him. However, the other party wanted to clear the dungeon alone, which involved the opportunity to ascend to a beyond grade A, so he respected Fu Ding's premonition. However, with Fu Ding's luck, no matter what danger he encountered, he would most likely be able to turn it into a blessing. If he added his luck black hole, there might be some twists and turns. It would be a good thing if he did not go. However, Han Xiao would not sit back and watch this baby of his be in danger. Just now, he had secretly placed an observer's mark on Fu Ding and was prepared to monitor the risk. After all, Fu Ding had the coordinates, and unlike Harrison, it would not take him much time. Han Xiao turned around and glanced at the research instrument that was analyzing the new technology. He temporarily froze the progress and stopped it. Every Beyond Grade A had their own training plan. Han Xiao had brought out more blueprints from the sanctum this time. During this time, he mainly studied these technologies and refreshed his attribute. In the words of a mechanic, this was called optimizing the allocation of resources, piling up attribute points in places where they were more cost-effective. Many little drops made an ocean, and it could also increase his combat strength. After entering the first sanctum this time, his authority had increased to level 9, and his memory capacity had increased again. Furthermore, the empty marks on the message board of the sanctum had also decreased. However, the last few paragraphs of content were still empty. Last time, the valuable information of Information Form Stripping Plan had appeared in the fourth last paragraph, but this time, the last paragraph had attracted his attention. Han Xiao could not help but recall. The route of the previous iteration's plan should have been correct, but it failed due to some loopholes. We have decided to add a control valve to the iteration's device to reduce the cost of dealing with the rampaging of the iteration. However, I don't know what form the control valve will take after the iteration's mutation. During the days he left the sanctum, he had been pondering over this piece of information. It seemed like the previous iteration had agreed with the plan of the previous iteration and made improvements on the foundation. Generally speaking, civilizations facing the Great Reboot would not completely place their hopes on the route of their predecessors. After all, the failures of their predecessors had already shown that their respective plans were not good, and they could only provide some lessons. However, the previous iteration was actually willing to believe in the plan of the previous iteration. If not for the fact that this plan had some merit, the subsequent civilizations would not have made such a decision. In that case, this plan that had been improved for 2 iterations was very valuable, and Han Shao secretly took it to heart. I'll have to enter the first sanctum a few more times in the future. I wonder how high my authority will be to unlock these 2 latest messages. Han Shao calmed himself down, left the workshop, and returned to the office on the top floor. He first looked down at the combat training of the other calamity grades before entering the vision of the observer's mark. At the private dock, mechanical assistants entered and exited the small carrier, quickly completing the debugging. Fu Ding sat in the pilot's seat, recalled for a moment, and entered the secondary dimension coordinates into the navigation device. He then started the shuttle engine, and immediately felt the spaceship vibrate slightly. Locking onto secondary dimension coordinates, warming up shuttle engine, activating internal space stabilization device. The artificial intelligence of the spaceship kept broadcasting, and a large number of navigation parameters appeared on the operation screen. Fu Ding set the autopilot, took out the soul swapper, and pressed it to his chest. He then took a deep breath and slowly calmed himself down. Not long after, the spaceship completed its pre-flight self-check, and the vibration suddenly disappeared. Fu Ding felt his body suddenly become heavy, as if he was pushed back into his seat by a strong force. The scene of the dock outside the window also shattered in an instant, turning into endless streams of light. The spaceship had officially entered the shuttle state. After an unknown period of time, the spaceship shook again and exited the shuttle state. The scene outside changed. This was a pitch-black space with no boundaries. An incalculably large gray nebula vortex slowly rotated outside the window, located above the spaceship. He looked up, but he could not see the full appearance of the vortex at all. He could not help but be shocked. At the center of the vortex, an enormous white beam of light shot out, extending out of sight. He did not know where the end was. At the same time, wisps of gray air constantly drifted in from all directions, attracted by the nebula vortex. They all merged into it like rivers flowing into the sea. This was the main material that made up this vortex. Before Fu Ding could exclaim, he discovered something strange. In this space, his mental strength seemed to have become more active, and the soul swapper was also vibrating slightly. He did not know what this meant. What is this place? Fu Ding looked around. There did not seem to be any signs of life around him. He released his psychic power, which was too active and difficult to control, and captured a gray air flow that passed by him to see what it was made of. After carefully investigating, Fu Ding's expression suddenly changed, revealing a look of shock. This is a soul? He suddenly turned his head and looked at the endless gray air flow, his eyes full of disbelief. This nebula vortex was actually made up of souls? At this time, Fu Ding suddenly thought of a piece of information and muttered to himself. In the imagination of some psychic ability users, when a living being dies, the soul seems to have completely dissipated, but in reality, there are still unobservable fragments left. Some of them turn into psychic undercurrents, while the other part drifts in the universe. There should be such places in this world that accept wandering soul fragments from the entire universe, filter them, crush them, and extract the remnant thoughts inside, condense them into a universal consciousness, and continue to sink into the bottom level of the subconsciousness dimension. Some psychic ability users call such places soul terminal, spirit world temple, and ultimate ruins. However, no one has ever found a similar secondary dimension. Could it be that the legends are real? Fu Ding had a look of surprise. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that this was one of the legendary soul terminals. During the development of the flickering world, Black Star had taken a group of officers to travel around, and Fu Ding had once been lucky enough to see a heart-sucking demon from the bottom level of the subconsciousness dimension. He had turned it into his own nutrients and strengthened his psychic power, so he had paid special attention to theories in this area. The three universal civilizations knew the coordinates of the bottom level of the subconsciousness dimension, but the endless heart-sucking demons were there, and they were extremely xenophobic. With the current technology, it was very difficult to build a stable outpost there. The heart-sucking demons fed on the subconsciousness of the universe, so the soul terminal was equivalent to their kitchen. The soul fragments here were all unprocessed ingredients. The soul swapper actually led me here. Could it be related to this dimension? Fu Ding thought to himself. The effect of the soul swapper had long exceeded its initial imagination. Perhaps it had mutated into a universal treasure because of the soul terminal, which was why the soul swapper had such a strange effect. After guessing for a while, Fu Ding carefully sensed the gray aura around him and smiled bitterly. These gray streams of air were the remnants of souls, and the center of the nebula vortex was constantly refining the remnants and serving them. The heart-sucking demon was a great tonic for the mind, but the side effects would take a lot of time to resolve. These soul fragments were even more impure. Although he could absorb the soul energy to refine his mental strength, most of his energy had to be used to resolve the side effects of schizophrenia and personality disorder. Furthermore, the small amount of energy contained in the soul fragments was almost undetectable to his mental strength. The conversion efficiency was extremely low, and the input far exceeded the output. As for the universe's subconsciousness after the refinement, soul energy had already been removed. Not only were the side effects even more violent, it was not beneficial to him at all. Speaking of which, this place is quite suitable for Hela. Her power of the dead can quickly purify soul energy. This might be her cultivation holy land, Fu Ding muttered to himself. Suddenly, he was stunned. He had almost forgotten that he had the soul swapper. If the target was only the soul fragments, the soul swapper should be able to separate the remnant thoughts and soul energy and refine them, right? Doesn't that mean that I can also absorb these countless soul fragments without any side effects? Fu Ding instantly understood and was overjoyed. Could this be the reason why the soul swapper led me here? If I cultivate here for a period of time, there's an 80% chance that I can advance. My intuition is not lying. This is indeed an opportunity to advance. Amazing. On the other side, Han Zhao's mouth twitched. He had mixed feelings. I thought that I was already very powerful with my cheat code. Who would have thought that you would be even more overboard? The fortuitous encounter from decades ago was actually linked to the current fortuitous encounter. The power of the advanced luck glow was terrifying. Compared to Harrison and Nero, who mainly relied on him, Han Xiao felt that Fu Ding's self-reliant luck glow was more impressive. Furthermore, not only did he obtain a fortuitous encounter, but his teammates also benefited. It was not in vain that he touched you first and treated you as the chief mascot. Chapter 1399. While Han Xiao was eating lemons, Fu Ding, who was in the soul terminal, had already started working. Fiden took out the soul swapper and activated his ability. Immediately, an invisible suction force was generated, and the soul residue in the surrounding area suddenly slowed down as they flew toward the nebula vortex. In the end, they changed directions and flew toward the starship he was on. The nebula vortex had a natural attraction force for soul residue. Fu Ding's actions were no different from snatching food from a tiger's mouth. However, this secondary dimension did not seem to have a dimensional consciousness, so no one cared about him. Streaks of soul residue were absorbed by the black, crystal-like surface of the soul swap instrument. The remaining thoughts were extracted and refined into pure, sparkling and translucent soul energy. Fu Ding extracted the results of the soul swapper through the soul connection, wrapped it with his psychic energy, and digested it into his brain. He felt refreshed, and there were no side effects like the memories and emotional impact that he usually suffered when using psychic energy to explore other people's thoughts. He could clearly feel that his psychic energy was being cleansed, and the cells in his body were cheering. He could clearly feel that his body was gradually transforming. It was like an extremely thirsty person continuously drinking clear and sweet spring water. He was filled with a sense of satisfaction from head to toe. It gave him a feeling even more comfortable than spiritual intercourse, and he could not help but indulge in it. When his body and mind were closely connected to the soul swapper, the psychic power that reverberated around Phaidon was stained with even more deep black. He obtained a new level of support from the soul swapper, and his characteristics were strengthened and became even more pure. This gave him a thrilling pleasure that made his soul tremble. Fu Ding could not help but let out a sigh of relief. It was as if he had entered a state of unconscious cultivation, and the cells in his body were gradually transitioning toward the beyond grade A level. With him as the center, a gray vortex that was countless times smaller formed, reflecting the enormous nebula vortex. The large and small vortex slowly rotated at the same speed in opposite directions. After confirming that Fu Ding was not in danger, Han Xiao did not disturb him and turned around to continue his unfinished research. Very soon, a month passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, Han Xiao arrived at the training ground square early in the morning. Not long ago, Fu Ding had finally ended his month-long cultivation and had already broken through to the beyond grade A realm. Only then did he remember to send a message saying that he was coming back, so Han Xiao waited there. Black Star's figure was seen by a calamity grade student who happened to pass by. He could not help but stop and look over with a strange gaze, curious about who Black Star was waiting for. Not long after, there was a flash of light, and the shuttle appeared out of thin air, jumping from the secondary dimension world back to the main universe and landing in the square. The cabin door opened and Fu Ding walked out. As soon as he saw Han Xiao, he showed a happy smile and strode forward to greet him. Compared to a month ago, his aura had undergone a huge change. Just his simple walk made the hearts of the curious calamity grade students tighten. They felt an instinctive sense of oppression. It was the pressure of a high-level life form. At this moment, the calamity grades present suddenly understood something and were shocked. They did not care that Han Xiao was right beside them and surrounded him. Fu Ding, you've already become a beyond grade A? I haven't seen you in the base during this time, and I was still curious about where you went. I didn't expect you to sublimate without a word. Not bad. Quick, share your experience. What kind of feeling is that? Fu Ding was surrounded by a large group of people and could only stop. He looked at Han Xiao across the crowd and revealed a helpless smile. His charm attribute was extremely high, and his personality was not one to offend people. Thus, he was quite popular. Even though he had become a beyond grade A, he did not have the mentality of being superior to others and did not push the crowd away. The calamity grades present were still calling their friends. Figures wrapped in streams of light jumped around the base, quickly approaching from afar. At the same time, several teleportation gates appeared beside them. A large group of calamity grades who had received the news rushed over and surrounded them. More and more people gathered, and the scene was as noisy as a market. Han Xiao, who was outside the crowd, coughed and suppressed everyone's voices. He smiled and said, Fu Ding has indeed advanced to the beyond grade A realm. He's the first student to successfully break through during the training. It's only been 2 to 3 months since the training began. This is a very good start. After receiving the exact information, everyone could not help but reveal envious expressions and congratulate Fu Ding. Sounds of congratulations immediately rang out from the crowd. Some of them were sincere, while others were jealous. Fu Ding sighed and explained with a gentle voice, Everyone, I managed to get through some lucky encounters. I'm afraid my experience is not applicable to everyone. There's no point in using it as a reference. Of course, which normal person would not be constipated when they advanced to the beyond grade A realm? Ening even went into seclusion for close to 100 years at this step. Only a cheat like you can do it as easily as eating and drinking, Han Xiao secretly complained. This time, Fu Ding saw the looks of pity on everyone's faces. He thought for a moment and smiled. However, I can let everyone experience my strength after my advancement and replicate my senses during my ascension. As he spoke, he closed his eyes and opened his mouth. A melodious psychic song swept out and covered everyone present. The Calamity Grade students were instantly energized, and they instantly obtained the comprehension of Fu Ding's advancement. At the same time, they also realized that the beautiful psychic song that directly sounded in their souls had aroused their emotions, and they were subconsciously immersed in it. The next moment, a positive energy quickly surged from the bottom of their hearts. Everyone's hearts were instantly filled with the desire to train. They could not wait to go into seclusion and train hard. It was as if they had used stimulants, and they became quite energetic. Han Xiao purposely released his mental barrier and tested Fu Ding's psychic ability after his advancement. When he saw the combat information on the interface, he could not help but raise his brows. Fu Ding specialized in the psychic path. The fortuitous encounter of his advancement this time had caused his ability to undergo a considerable transformation. His psychic song had merged with the special characteristics of the Soul Swapper, and his psychic ability had increased tremendously. He could now more efficiently trigger the emotions and desires of living beings, achieving a strong hypnotic effect. Every time he triggered a different emotion, the target would enter the relevant state. At this moment, everyone was full of enthusiasm. Fu Ding had used his psychic song to trigger everyone's motivation, and what appeared in the status bar was the effect of increasing the efficiency of gaining experience. If it was used on others, it would increase the efficiency of their cultivation. Han Xiao instantly thought of the role Fu Ding could play. Although Fu Ding's current grade was not high, and he was not good at fighting head-on, he could bring a large range of buffs and debuffs to his teammates or enemies. This was more useful than his own combat ability. A powerful support is much more valuable than an ordinary beyond grade A super. Just this ability alone is enough to make him popular. He won't be at the bottom. Most importantly, he can increase the training efficiency of others without any side effect. With his help, we might be able to produce more beyond grade as various thoughts flashed through Han Zhao's mind, and he was overjoyed. This time, his gaze suddenly paused. He realized that in the crowd that was brimming with enthusiasm, there was an extremely eye-catching figure. His face was still gloomy, forming a stark contrast with the people around him. This figure was like a firefly in the dark night, so bright and outstanding. Who else could it be other than Lagi? Han Xiao was curious. Hey, Fu Ding, this move of yours doesn't seem to work on him. Hearing this, Fiden turned to look at Lagi and was taken aback. That's not right. This move of mine shouldn't be ineffective against calamity grades, right? As he spoke, Fu Ding once again released a psychic song to motivate Lagi. Lagi's spirit instantly rose. He was no longer hunched, and his posture was as straight as a javelin. His entire temperament changed drastically, and his eyes were filled with vigor. Isn't this effective, Before Fiden could finish his sentence, he saw that Lagi's state only lasted for a few seconds. Lagi's high-spirited aura suddenly leaked out like a balloon. In the blink of an eye, he returned to his original decadent state, and he switched back to his lifeless, dead fish mode. It was like the difference between breathing in and relaxing. What are you? Fu Ding opened his mouth and was a little confused. This kind of motivational state usually lasted for a few days, but how did it disappear in just a few seconds on Lagi? He did not give up and wanted to try again, but Logi stopped him with reluctance written all over his face. Don't torture me. This is all futile. Sigh, even if you become a beyond grade A, you won't be able to free me. Just let me rot in a corner quietly. TSK, what a familiar trash person, what beautiful Logi words. Han Zhao's heart twitched as he listened. He sized Logi up and made a bold guess. I think I understand. Your motivational ability is only similar to hypnosis after all, not brainwashing. You can't change the personality of others, so it's different when you trigger different emotions. Maybe Logi is immune to this kind of mental stimulation? As he spoke, Han Xiao felt that he had guessed the truth. It was definitely because Logi's values were too F*king firm. A short period of motivation would only be broken down in an instant. It was like drinking a mouthful of chicken soup and deciding to work hard the next day, but the next day, he would still be playing cards and sleeping. Fu Ding felt that it made sense and probed. Then, why don't I try to stimulate his dispirited emotions and see if your guess is right? Hearing this, Han Zhao's mouth twitched. Better not. He's already dispirited enough. If you make things worse for him, I'm afraid he'll kill himself on the spot. That's reasonable. Fu Ding was speechless. The calamity grade students present had obtained the experience they wanted. Seeing that Han Xiao and Fu Ding still had something to say, they all tactfully left and went to train their abilities with full enthusiasm. Very soon, only the two of them were left in the square. With no one else around, Han Xiao walked in front of Fu Ding, patted him on the shoulder, and said with relief, "Congratulations. You've already left your name in the sanctum. As long as I'm still alive, death will stay away from you." Fu Ding smiled and said, "My fortuitous encounter this time came from the Soul Swapper, and if not for you, I wouldn't have obtained this universal treasure. Thank you. You don't have to be so polite with me." Han Xiao waved his hands and said, "Speaking of which, you don't have a nickname yet, right? I'll think of one for you. How about we call you Singer? How appropriate." Singer was Fu Ding's nickname in his previous life. Although his life experience this time was completely different, in Han Zhao's opinion, this nickname was still suitable for Fu Ding. "Alright, then I'll call you a Singer." Fu Ding smiled, indicating that he accepted this nickname. He then retracted his smile and explained what he had experienced this time without leaving out anything. Although he guessed that Black Star might already know, he still told him. After hearing Fu Ding's explanation, Han Xiao smiled and nodded. "I understand. This is your own opportunity. Even if you become a beyond grade A, you can continue to use that place to quickly increase your strength. You have to grasp it well. Of course. By the way, the soul terminal is also beneficial to Hela. I can only digest the soul residue with the help of external objects, but Hela is born with this ability. Her growth speed there might be faster than mine. Ask her what she thinks. Anyway, the soul residue there is endless, and the part one can digest is not worth mentioning. It's hard for you to think of her. I think she'll be very happy." The more Han Xiao looked at Fu Ding, the more he admired him. Suppressing his impulse, Han Xiao coughed and said, "I'll inform her about the underworld now. I'll go inform Hela now. She's still training in the underworld. I'll need you to bring her there. After all, you're the one who found this place. Without your permission, I won't give the coordinates to anyone." With that, Han Xiao changed into the king and teleported away. Fu Ding watched Han Xiao leave and clenched his fists. An inexplicable emotion reverberated in his heart. He exhaled softly and muttered to himself, "You've protected me for hundreds of years. You've protected me for nearly 100 years. Now, it's finally my turn to help you." Chapter 1400. With a flash of light, Han Xiao had already arrived at the underworld dimension. As soon as he entered, he saw Hela fighting Aurora. In the pitch-black sky, Two huge energy balls, one red and one gold, were closely attached to each other, like two conjoined suns. The scarlet power of the dead pressed forward, constantly squeezing the space of life energy, like a bully bullying a cowering girl. In the center of the energy cluster floated a graceful figure. Hela's red hair danced under the surging energy, her expression indifferent and effortless. And in the golden light cluster on the other side, Aurora's blonde hair danced wildly. She clenched her fists and raised them in front of her. Her cheeks were red, and she was using all her strength to pump out life energy, struggling to resist Hela's suppression. An older sister bullying a younger sister. I can't pretend that I didn't see it. Do you need help? I can help you bully back. Han Xiao glanced at it, raised his eyebrows slightly, and shouted at Aurora. Hela turned to glance at him, paused, and suddenly retracted the power of the dead. The scarlet sun in the sky quickly shrank in the shape of a vortex until it disappeared, returning to her body. On the other side, Aurora suddenly lost the pressure, as if two people were pushing each other, and one of them suddenly let go. The life energy that had lost its resistance spurted out involuntarily, and a golden tsunami suddenly appeared in the air. She hurriedly restrained the energy, and slowly guided it back into her body. The golden sun quickly disappeared, leaving only Aurora's figure in the air, panting rapidly, as if she was about to collapse. Hela frowned, her sharp eyes staring at Aurora, and said in a deep voice, "Your control is still too weak. Rest for a while and continue training." With that said, Hela turned to look at Han Xiao and explained calmly, "We're not joking. The extreme pressure class can speed up the growth of her life energy, broaden her upper limit, and help improve her strength. This is one of the special training I designed for her." Han Xiao shrugged. He knew that this was training and was just joking. At this time, Aurora also changed back to her petite figure. She flew to the front of the two people. Her face was still flushed from exerting too much force. She looked a little shy and a little embarrassed. "The reason why I lost in the previous battle was because I wasn't strong enough. I feel that I can no longer be lazy and wait for my life energy to increase by itself. The speed is too slow, so I specially asked my sister to give me special training. Every bit of improvement counts." "Not bad, very hard-working." Han Xiao smiled and praised. He raised his hand and rubbed Aurora's small head. Her soft hair slid through his fingers and felt very smooth to the touch. Aurora enjoyed it very much. She even raised her head slightly and took the initiative to get closer to Han Xiao's palm. At this moment, Hela floated over with an expressionless face. She slapped away Han Xiao's hand and said, "Why are you looking for me? If there's nothing else, you can leave first. The special training is not over yet. Don't disturb us." Han Xiao rubbed the back of his hand that was red from the slap, and the mark quickly disappeared. He smiled and said, "I'm here to tell you a piece of good news. Fu Ding has already become a Beyond Grade A Super." Hela's eyes moved, but she was not surprised. She nodded calmly. "It's indeed a good thing. Congratulate him on my behalf. However, to him, stepping into this level is only a matter of time. In addition, there's another surprise for you. Fuden found the legendary soul, returned to Void and Remnant Soul End. He knows that you can devour souls to strengthen yourself, so he asked me to ask if you're interested in taking a look." Hearing this, Hela's expression changed. Her eyes widened slightly, and she finally had some emotional reaction. She also knew the legend of the final destination of remnant souls. The power of the dead used souls as nourishment, and she also yearned for this legendary place. However, this was just a guess. There were no sightings of the final destination of remnant souls in history. If what Black Star said was true, then Fiden should be the first to discover it. "Of course I'm interested. When are we going?" Almost without hesitation, Hela blurted out, instantly forgetting about Aurora's special training. "Let's go now. Fu Ding is already waiting for you at the training base." "Then what are we waiting for? Hurry up." Hela took the initiative to put on a set of King without hesitation and signaled Han Shao to activate it with his mechanical force. Han Shao laughed, put on the King, and activated his mechanical force. With a flash of lightning, the two of them disappeared without a trace. More than 10 minutes later, Fu Ding brought Han Shao and Hela directly to the soul end. Looking at the endless soul remnants, Hela revealed a rare look of shock and surprise. For a moment, she forgot to speak and stared at the huge soul nebula vortex in a daze. "How is this place? Is it helpful to you?" Fu Ding asked. Hela came back to her senses and nodded decisively. There was an uncontrollable excitement in her tone. "These soul remnants are very beneficial to me. My intuition tells me that this is the best place for me to train. It's good that it's useful. Anyway, there's no one here. You can stay as long as you want." Fu Ding smiled. "Thanks." Hela patted Fu Ding's shoulder hard and habitually rubbed against him like Han Shao did. Her eyes were fixed on the countless soul remnants, and there was a burning passion in her beautiful eyes. At this moment, she made a decision without hesitation. "Before the World Tree enters the mainland, I'll be staying here. No one can pull me away." Hela was rarely excited, but while she was happy, she vaguely felt that she had forgotten something. At this moment, a faint voice suddenly sounded in her mind. "Sis, what about my special training?" I knew I forgot something." Hela's expression froze. She coughed and sent a telepathic message back. "Ahem, things have changed. I won't be going back for a while. You can train by yourself first." This tone was more or less like a parent who had to coax a child when they were busy with serious matters. It gave off a feeling of "go play by yourself." "Humph. I'll train by myself then." Aurora angrily closed the telepathic message. "I've been abandoned just like that? You promised to help me cultivate, but you ran away yourself. Stupid sister, I'm ignoring you." Hela did not care that the mental communication was cut off. She could not wait to get out of the spaceship, and her body floated in the outer space. Walala! The power of the dead gushed out, forming a scarlet tornado that swept up the surrounding soul dregs, crushing them and breaking them down, turning them into pure soul energy that was swallowed by the power of the dead to strengthen her Esper ability. Han Zhao's eyes flashed. With such a fortuitous encounter, Hela is also on the fast track to leveling up. I estimate that in 10 years, no, in less than 10 years, a new peak beyond grade A super will appear. When she reaches this level, her combat strength will be greatly enhanced. With her ability, as long as her strength grows, it won't be a problem for her to resist 2 or 3 peak beyond grade as of the World Tree. He stroked his chin as he watched this scene. He nodded and had high hopes for Hela. Hela and Fu Ding stayed in the Soul Terminal to cultivate. Han Shao returned to the training base and continued to train everyone according to the original plan. He also studied the sanctums on his own and was immersed in learning. Fu Ding came back every few days to give the students in the training base an incentive buff. Everyone was immersed in training every day, and their sense of time became dull. In the blink of an eye, more than half a year had passed in a frenzy of training. The battle at the front lines was still going on intensely, and the World Tree Army advanced unwaveringly under the harassment of the 3 universal civilizations' suicide squads. The forums had been flooded with relevant information for half a year, and countless players were enthusiastically exchanging all kinds of combat information. Han Shao and the other beyond grade, as were training at the back and had withdrawn from the front lines, seizing the time to improve their strength in the calm before the storm. Because they were not in the eyes of the players, the beyond grade as did not have much to talk about in the past half a year, so they kept a low profile. The intensity of the war meant that there were many combat missions. Many players who acted as suicide squads at the front lines earned a lot, and batches of them reached the version limit of level 181 after another. A portion of the extra EXP was used to level up their skills, and a portion of it flowed to Han Xiao through spending in the Black Star Corps. Thanks to the high rewards of the Suicide Squad missions, the players earned EXP faster, which indirectly shortened the time it took for Han Xiao to accumulate EXP. In less than a year, Han Xiao had roughly gathered enough EXP to level up to level 360. His efficiency was higher than expected. After so many years, he finally had a chance to advance again. Han Xiao did not hesitate and chose an auspicious day to come to an uninhabited planet in the territory. He was prepared to invest all his EXP to level up and reach the threshold of a new promotion. Chapter 1401. A meteor tore through the dark universe and fell toward a dark brown planet, landing on a bare and steep mountain peak. The flowing flame-like sparks scattered, revealing Han Xiao's figure. He looked down at the endless dark brown land, then looked up at the brilliant and mysterious aurora in the sky and nodded. "Let's level up here." Han Xiao focused, opened the interface, and poured all the experience he had painstakingly accumulated into leveling up. His level, which had not changed for a long time, finally shot up like a rocket again. The interface notifications kept popping up like water. Divine Throne Mechanic leveled up to LV 41. Plus 500 energy, plus 5 STR, plus 5 DX, plus 18 Yendi, plus 25 INT. You have received 20 free attribute points and plus 1 awakening point. The Divine Throne Mechanic leveled up to LV 60, max. Plus 2000 energy, plus 5 STR, plus 5 DX, plus 18 Yendi, plus 25 INT. You have received 20 free attribute points and plus 1 awakening point. You have reached the upper limit of your main class. You have triggered class advancement mission. Divine Craftsman. Divine Craftsman, more than 10,000 blueprints and skills. You have built 100 different universal treasure mechanical equipment. You have reached level 360. You have triggered the promotion mission, a God-slaying trial. God-slaying trial. Completely kill 5 beyond grade as with God's trait transformation. Requires 1 from each of the 5 classes. Pugilist, Esper, Mechanic, Mage, and Psychic. Wow, so ruthless. Han Zhao's eyes moved and he clicked his tongue. The difficulty of this mission was countless times more difficult than the previous promotion and class advancement. The difficulty was on a completely different level. Just the requirement of Divine Craftsman to build 100 different universal treasures was enough to stun a normal mechanic. Even Han Xiao himself was still some distance away from this number. Although the Sanctum had provided enough blueprints, he had not built all of them yet. In addition, there was also the God-slaying trial, to kill 5 peak beyond grade as, which was even more dangerous. Furthermore, there was the word complete in it. Han Xiao estimated that the World Tree and the Underworld experts' shortcuts would not count. It was most likely that they would not die if they did not enter the Sanctum, so the targets would probably be chosen from normal people. Unfortunately, no matter how harsh the mission is, I have the completion card. Han Xiao had been hoarding some mission completion cards over the years in order to avoid this kind of advancement mission. Although these 2 missions were difficult, he would at most be surprised, but he wouldn't find it difficult at all. These 2 quests are too much of a scam. Fortunately, I can skip them. Han Xiao heaved a sigh of relief and solemnly used the mission completion card. The names of the 2 missions instantly turned into a golden completed symbol. He thought that it would be the same as before. Once he completed the advancement mission, he would be considered to have successfully advanced. However, the situation this time seemed to be different. A message popped up on the interface that surprised him. Level 360 promotion mission completed. You can choose to advance at any time. Note: this advancement is extremely risky. There is a 90% to 96% chance of failure. Once you fail, you will need to complete a new advancement mission before you can advance again. At the same time, there is a chance of unknown mutations during the advancement, which is life-threatening. It is recommended that you complete the following conditions before choosing to advance. During this advancement, your life form will be extremely unstable and prone to mutations. Possibilities include, but are not limited to, unlimited proliferation, gene collapse, cell independence, universe assimilation, and so on. Therefore, you will need to use certain special items to stabilize your life form. This condition will be triggered during the advancement. Advancement success rate plus 33. 3%, malignant mutation rate minus 33. 3%. You will need some external help for this advancement. The strength of a single person will always be limited and one-sided. You will need 4 supers of different elements as assistants, and you must activate the god's trait transformation of the super system. The higher the level of the god's trait transformation, the better the assistance effect. This condition will be triggered during the advancement. Advancement success rate plus 33. 3%, malignant mutation rate minus 33. 3%. You will need a Beyonders vestige as a catalyst for this advancement. When supers who have completed the god's trait transformation attempt to break through to a higher level, they might die due to malignant mutations. The life essence, soul consciousness, and core energy that are emitted during the advancement will condense into the Beyonders vestige, which cannot be observed by normal life forms. Only supers in this state will obtain the relevant perception. This condition will be triggered during the advancement. Advancement success rate plus 33. 3%, malignant mutation rate minus 33. 3%. Note, if all the conditions are not met, even if the advancement is successful, the grade will not change. If all 3 conditions are triggered during the advancement, the apotheosis advancement will be activated. So, it's actually this mode. Han Xiao finished reading the message on the interface, and his eyes flickered. Before today, he wasn't sure if the level 360 promotion would allow him to reach a new grade. Everything was just a guess. But now, he finally confirmed that the promotion this time could indeed allow him to reach a new grade. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many changes. This made him a little excited. Han Xiaoxin's mind sank into his body and clearly sensed that every cell was in a critical state. As long as he was willing, he could activate his promotion at any time. However, looking at the warning on the interface, Han Xiao was also afraid that something would happen during his promotion. He looked down at the contents of the 3 conditions, which were all in a gray, not triggered state. He tried to use the mission completion card on these 3 conditions, but it did not complete like the promotion mission. The notification was that the mission completion card was ineffective on the target. As expected, it doesn't work. Looks like there's no way to cheat this time. Han Xiao frowned and then relaxed. He was not surprised. When he saw the 3 conditions, he had vaguely guessed that the mission completion card might be useless against them. The mission completion card was a special item used on the interface. It did not have a physical body, and its function was to skip the mission content to obtain the most basic reward on the interface. It would not actually change the external environment, nor would it create a physical object out of thin air. These 3 prerequisites required physical objects to assist in the promotion. The mission completion card could not create them, and these 3 prerequisites did not exist in the form of a mission. However, the mission completion card skipped the previous promotion mission, which had already saved him a lot of time. Furthermore, if the promotion failed and triggered a new promotion mission, he could still use the mission completion card to pass it without spending any effort. Of course, it was best to succeed in one go. Han Xiao naturally did not want to fail. Since there was no shortcut to breaking through a new grade, he could only focus on studying the 3 conditions in order to increase the safety of the promotion. Soon, he had some ideas. The first condition required some kind of special stabilizer. It was probably because the promotion this time would have a situation where life form would be reorganized and more intense than previous promotions. That was why it was extremely unstable. It was like melting a piece of steel and casting it into another shape. A mold was needed. Han Xiao had a few ideas about this. Special items in the information form could be used as such a mold, but there was a high chance that it would require a universal treasure. Ordinary information form devices might be ineffective. Another option was to obtain the support of some universal treasure with stabilizing characteristics. Han Xiao knew of a ready-made one. It was the ethereal country weapon with the indestructible characteristic. It should be able to achieve a similar effect. However, this thing is with Wernos, and it's a treasure of the Arcane Church. I wonder if they're willing to borrow it temporarily. Han Xiao shook his head. The second condition was that he needed the other 4 peak beyond grade as to assist him in his promotion. If he was in a civilization where individual strength was not developed enough, he would not even be able to gather enough people. However, the 3 universal civilizations should be considered prosperous in the universe, so they had enough experts to choose from. With his connections and the cohesion of the sanctum, it would not be difficult to find 4 assistants. This should be the simplest of the 3 conditions. However, the intention of cooperation revealed by this condition made Han Xiao sigh. Being able to grow to such a level all by himself seemed to be the limit. Leveling up was no longer a personal matter. If one wanted to become an even more powerful individual, they would need more external help. The development of a civilization would also affect whether or not an individual could improve further. In the vast universe, a person's strength was ultimately limited. Without external help, it would be difficult to continue moving forward at a certain point. Is there a limit to a single life form? Han Xiao shook his head. In addition, the requirement to gather the other 4 classes reminded Han Xiao of a saying that had been passed down in his previous life. The 5 super systems represented the 5 aspects of a true god. The pugilist class represented the divine body, the psychic class represented the divine soul, the mage class represented the divine right, the esper class represented the mystical power, and the mechanic class represented the divine artifact. This saying was widely circulated, but there was no actual evidence. However, looking at this condition, Han Xiao felt that this saying might not be completely false. At the very least, there was some connection. Could it be that the new level is really the combination of all 5 classes? This thought subconsciously flashed through Han Xiao's mind, but he quickly shook his head and denied it. He felt that he was thinking too much. The difference between the energy attributes of the 5 major systems was not likely to be broken. Even if he broke through to the level of a true god, he would probably only specialize in one aspect and would not be able to do everything. Compared to the other 4 classes, he felt that the mechanic class, which represented the divine artifact, seemed to be the special one. Basically, the history of the development of every civilization was the history of the evolution of tools. This represented the fire of wisdom and the budding of civilization. Knowing how to use tools was, to a certain extent, the biggest difference between an intelligent life form and a wild beast. For the so-called gods, it probably had a similar meaning. If the gods only used the power of the other 4 classes to fight, without the fancy clothes, it was actually not much different from fighting barehanded. At most, the moves would be different, and only magic and esper abilities would have some special effects. However, using the so-called divine artifact was equivalent to an ordinary person picking up a sword or a gun. The danger was completely different. It was like 2 max-leveled heroes. One was a blank slate, while the other had 6 godly equipment. Even if their skills were different, their strength was not on the same level at all. In the many Xianxia myths that Han Xiao had read in his previous life, The status of magical equipment was extremely important. It even represented strength, especially in the primordial setting that he had read about. In his opinion, the divine artifact represented by the mechanic class was most likely such a concept. Otherwise, the advantage of late-stage mechanics would not be so obvious in front of the other four classes. Han Shao calmed himself down and put away these thoughts. His expression turned serious. He had some ideas about the first two conditions, but the last one gave him a headache. The Beyonders vestige came from a peak beyond grade A, who had failed to break through to a new level and died. In the explored universe where the three universal civilizations were located, as far as he knew, the only beyond grade as who had similar experiences were the Life and Death Sisters. However, Onisilus said that the two sisters of the previous generation were pursuing the true meaning of death, so they took the initiative to die. Han Shao did not know if that was an act of trying to break through to a new level. Even if it was true, the bodies of the two sisters of the previous generation had already been burned by Onisilus like firewood, and the two Esper abilities that intercepted their information forms had also been inherited by Hela and Aurora. He did not know if this was the so-called Beyonders vestige. Even if it was, how should he use it? Could it be that he had to extract their Esper abilities? Wait a minute, if Hela and Aurora grew to this level in the future, wouldn't they have triggered the third condition? TSK, comparing yourself to others is infuriating. Han Zhao's eyelids twitched. He had once tried to use the Mark of the Underworld as a medium to use the Sanctum to revive the two sisters of the previous generation, but he failed in the end. Maybe they were still alive, or maybe they had intercepted the information forms and integrated them with their Esper abilities, so they lost the Sanctum revival. Now, Han Shao had another guess, which was that if a peak beyond grade A failed to break through and died, would they not be able to accept the Sanctum revival? Perhaps the information form records in the Sanctum had changed because of this, or perhaps the failed breakthrough had survived in another unknown way, such as this so-called Beyonders vestige. No one had stepped into the higher levels, and everything was filled with mystery. Han Shao could only guess blindly. However, the introduction said that only peak beyond grade, as in my current state, can sense the Beyonders vestige. I'll go to the underworld to verify it later. If it's not, I'm afraid I'll have to search the entire universe. If the worst-case scenario... Han Zhao's eyes darkened. The worst-case scenario was that the so-called Beyonders vestige did not exist in the current iteration, and no one died after failing to break through to a new level. If that was the case, he would have to think of another way. In any case, he had already decided to trigger all the conditions as much as possible. He had to overcome all difficulties. After all, the remarks indicated that as long as one condition was missing, it would only be a normal promotion, and he would not be able to break through. According to his understanding, this meant that he would not be able to obtain the bonuses of a new level. He would not be able to open the gap between a beyond grade A and a calamity grade. All sorts of thoughts flashed through his mind. Han Shao calmed himself down and exhaled. No matter what, let's test my perception of the Beyonders vestige first. With that said, he calmed down and searched for the Beyonders vestige through the throbbing of the critical state. Very soon, Han Shao felt his consciousness fall into an indescribable mystery. There seemed to be layers of fog in front of his eyes, and blurry shadows flashed past in the fog. He could not see them clearly. After an unknown period of time, Han Shao suddenly caught a flash of light. His eyes widened as he finally found this perception. The fog dissipated, and he suddenly saw the light. Originally, he thought that his perception would be barren and that he would not be able to sense much of the Beyonders vestige. However, the moment he entered this field of vision, Han Shao was shocked and knew that he was ridiculously wrong. Buzz. In an instant, dozens of sensing sources appeared in his perception, distributed in various directions. However, he only knew the direction and not the distance. They were all Beyonder's vestige. Han Zhao's eyes widened in surprise. A lot of thoughts flashed through his mind. Did this mean that in the entire universe, there were at least dozens of peak beyond grade, as from unknown regions, who had reached his level and died because of breaking through to a new level? Han Zhao had mixed feelings. The center of the story I knew in my previous life was the three universal civilizations, but it did not mean that this was the center of the universe. There was always someone stronger. In places that could not be seen, how many powerful civilizations were still thriving in the universe, and how many things were happening. No one in the explored universe had broken through to a new level. Was the vast unexplored universe really the same? Was this iteration really only in the early stages? After a long time, he let out an inexplicable sigh. The universe is really big. Chapter 1402. Han Zhao sighed and calmed himself down. He shook his head and shook his head to get rid of his unnecessary thoughts. No matter how vast the unexplored universe was and how many powerful unknown civilizations there were, it had nothing to do with him for the time being. The most important thing was to deal with the problem at hand. His focus was still on the war between the three universal civilizations and the World Tree. As for the iteration problem, it was useless to think too much about it now. He could not deal with it for the time being. Although I can sense the existence of the Beyonder's vestige, I only know the direction. The distance is unknown. If that's the case, it's probably like finding a needle in a haystack. Han Zhao pondered. However, one's perception was dead and one was alive. It was not impossible to calculate the distance. After all, the direction of one's perception could barely be seen as a straight line. As long as he kept changing his position, he could still vaguely calculate which one was closer through the deviation of the perception line. However, at the scale of the universe, he did not know how long he would have to move to deviate the direction of his perception. It would probably be measured in star systems and star clusters. Although this method would take some time, it was still an effective method. The only problem he had to worry about was that if the nearest Beyonder's vestige was not around the explored universe, it would be a pain in the ass. The journey would take an unknown amount of time. No matter what, at least we have a preliminary solution to the three conditions. Let's follow this plan first. Han Xiaoxin heaved a sigh of relief. The three conditions were difficult and easy. The second one was the easiest. He just needed to inform Wernos in advance and activate the face fruit. He did not know how long the third one would take. He decided to start with the first one and contact Wernos. Han Zhao immediately took out his communicator, found Wernos' private number, and called him. In the previous battle, the two of them had gotten to know each other. After the ceasefire, they had also exchanged private numbers. The phone rang twice, and the projection of Wernos appeared on the screen. He was wearing a solemn robe, as if his daily prayers had been interrupted. Black Star? It's rare for you to contact me. Why are you looking for me? Wernos asked, his tone emotionless. Han Zhao smiled but did not get to the point immediately. He said, "It's been a while since we last met. I suddenly miss you." "Is that so?" Wernos' expression was calm and unmoved. He only looked at Han Zhao calmly and did not say anything. There was a subtext that said, "Are we that close?" Han Zhao rubbed his chin and said with great interest, "Speaking of which, I've been curious lately. As the strongest person in the direct line of descent, why didn't Ethereal let you participate in the interception circle battle? This is an internal secret. I can't tell you. If you're here to persuade me to join the battle, then forget it." Wernos' tone was calm. "Do you have anything else? Tisk, so mysterious. Could it be that Ethereal was worried that you would die in battle and lost their national weapon?" Han Zhao cursed inwardly. Seeing that Wernos' attitude was lukewarm, he did not continue to beat around the bush and raised the main goal this time. I'm looking for you because I have something to discuss with you. I want to borrow the ethereal national treasure. Hearing this, Werno's eyes flashed. He did not immediately reject and asked, "What do you want to do with it?" "I want to try to break through to a new grade. I feel that the ethereal national treasure will come in handy." Han Xiao did not hide this goal. "Are you going to try to take this step?" As expected of the most talented super in history. Werno's eyes lit up. He was not shocked but happy. He sized up Han Xiao and revealed an inexplicable smile. He had always thought highly of Black Star and believed that Black Star was the person most likely to open a higher grade and break through the obstacle in his eyes. As long as a pioneer walked a path, the future generations would have a trace to follow. Regardless of success or failure, it would become an important reference for the future generations. Therefore, when he learned that Han Xiao was going to break through to a higher grade, Wernos was very happy. "From my personal point of view, I'm very happy to help you. Perhaps you can become a pioneer in the exploration of individual strength. I can also benefit from it. There's no reason to reject you," Wernos smiled. However, before Han Xiao could reply, he changed the topic and shook his head. "However, the ethereal national treasure is not my private property. If you want to borrow it, you have to ask for the permission of the Arcane Church. If they don't agree, I can't lend it to you privately." Hearing this, Han Xiao was not surprised and nodded. "Of course I understand. Help me tell the upper echelons of ethereal that the conditions can be discussed. By the way, I also need you to help me put in a few good words and try to convince the upper echelons of ethereal." "Okay, I'll help you." Wernos nodded and did not refuse. Other than the upper echelons of ethereal, no one could order someone like him to do things. However, seeing that Black Star was trying to break through to a new grade, he did not mind helping him. The two of them chatted for a while more before Han Xiao hung up and heaved a sigh of relief. The results of the initial contact were all right, and Wernos had no objections. Then, he only needed to settle the upper echelons of the Arcane Church. Of course, the upper echelons of ethereal would definitely not give in so easily. He had to take out some chips that they cared about. Next, he just had to wait for ethereal to come to him for negotiations. On the other side, in the Arcane Church, Temple of 10,000 Gods. After Wernos received Han Xiao's call, he quickly contacted the ethereal Pope and was very concerned about this matter. With his identity, he could talk to the ethereal Pope directly. Soon, the projection of the ethereal Pope appeared on the screen. "High Priest, what's the matter?" The ethereal Pope was a little surprised. Wernos almost never took the initiative to look for him. Usually, he was the one who called to issue orders. He was a little surprised to suddenly receive a call. Wernos had no intention of chatting and went straight to the point. "Black Star came to me just now and wants to borrow the ethereal national treasure. I came to discuss it with you." The ethereal Pope was stunned for a moment. He looked at Wernos in surprise and almost could not believe his ears. "Lend the national treasure to an outsider? Do you know what you're talking about?" Black Star said that the conditions are negotiable. Wernos' tone was calm. The ethereal Pope suppressed his emotions and asked with a frown, "Why does he want to borrow the national treasure?" Black Star said that he wants to borrow the power of the national treasure to try to break through to a new level of individual strength. "A new level? You mean above beyond grade A?" Hearing this, the ethereal Pope was shocked. This was big news. As the leader of the current beyond grade as, if Black Star successfully opened up a new level of individual strength, it would have an unknown and far-reaching impact on the internal structure and the World Tree War. In fact, because of Black Star's record-breaking growth speed, the three universal civilizations were all mentally prepared for Black Star to break through to a higher level, but they did not expect it to happen so quickly. After all, although Black Star was strong, he had only stepped into the beyond grade A realm for a few decades. He was too young under the lifespan of a beyond grade A, only at the stage of an infant to a teenager. You want to help him? The ethereal Pope's tone sank. He had to ask for Werno's opinion before borrowing the national treasure. Since he had come to help Black Star pass the message, he had most likely agreed. This made the ethereal Pope a little unhappy. Wernos looked straight ahead and said calmly, "Why not? Wouldn't it be advantageous for our side to have an exceptional expert?" "That's true, but you know the significance of the national treasure and the threat level of Black Star." The ethereal Pope paused. Although he did not finish his sentence, the meaning was clear enough. Due to the exposure of the truth of the Sanctum revival, the three universal civilizations' fear of Han Shao increased further. Although they did not want to fight internally, they did not want to see Black Star continue to become stronger, especially at an unprecedented new level. No one knew what level of strength this level was. Furthermore, he had more concerns. During the exploration era, after the first primordial one successfully broke through, the other beyond grade as popped up one after another. No one knew if Black Star would affect the other beyond grade, as when he stepped into a higher level, the importance of individual strength would increase further. Wernos did not mind and said slowly, "Based on my experience, it's not so easy to break through to a new level. Black Star is still in the experimental stage. If he doesn't fail a few times, it's basically impossible for him to succeed. It's still unknown if the national treasure can be used. The chances of his promotion failing are very high." The ethereal Pope narrowed his eyes and did not say anything. Seeing this, Wernos paused and continued. "Therefore, I feel that lending the national treasure might not give Black Star any benefits, but we will definitely be able to gain benefits from him." "Then what do you think we should ask for?" the ethereal Pope asked. "I mean to ask for the 10,000 deity scepter to be unsealed. It has been sealed for too long." It's not impossible." Hearing this, the ethereal Pope narrowed his eyes and fell into deep thought. The 10,000 deity scepter had been frozen by Han Shao with the spacetime amber a long time ago. It was originally taken away by the Radiant Federation and was returned in a joint operation. However, the research department of the Arcane Church was also unable to unseal it and could only look at it but not use it. Currently, only Black Star could unlock it. Releasing this universal treasure was still somewhat tempting. This was a powerful weapon that could kill individuals. It was useful both internally and externally. At this moment, Wernos struck while the iron was hot and said slowly, "I know you're worried about accidents, but the national treasure has already fused with me. Even if Black Star has other thoughts, he won't be able to do anything. The risk is very low. Furthermore, in the current situation, the chances of Black Star turning against us are very small." As the face of Ethereal, he had a lot of authority, but he rarely gave advice and usually did not care about matters. However, at this moment, he took the initiative to speak up for Han Shao. He really wanted to facilitate the cooperation between the two sides and observe Black Star's method of breaking through to a new grade as a reference. Wernos was quite curious. He had no clue for so many years, so why did Black Star feel that the ethereal national treasure could help him break through to a new grade? He had owned the national treasure for so many years, but he had never discovered such an effect. Could it be that the ethereal national treasure had some function that he did not understand? In the underworld dimension, a light flashed, and Han Shao teleported here. At this moment, the two sisters were not here. Hela was cultivating in the Soul Terminal. At first, Aurora was still stubborn and focused on her cultivation. Later on, she could not help but go to the Soul Terminal together, letting Hela cultivate while supervising her special training. Therefore, of the 4 beyond Grade A officers of the army, 3 were in the Soul Terminal. Only Lodhair stayed outside to train Carrot. Han Shao activated the Beyonder's vestige vision and quickly glanced at the underworld. There's no Beyonders vestige here. Looks like I'm overthinking. I'll check with Hela and the others later. Han Shao shook his head and sighed. He did not have much hope. After he finished chatting with Wernos, he immediately came here to look for clues. He planned to start with the people around him. If the people around him did not have the Beyonders vestige, he would calculate the location. Beep beep beep. At this moment the communicator rang again. It was a call from Wernos. You're calling back so quickly? How many minutes has it been? Han Shao raised his brows and picked up the call. Wernos appeared on the screen and said, Black Star, the Arcane Church wishes to make a deal with you. I can lend you the national weapon once, but you have to undo the seal on the 10,000 deity scepter. At the same time, the next 3 sanctum revivals will be free. Whoa, 3 times for free is too much. I'm only borrowing the national weapon once. This price is too high. I think unsealing the 10,000 deity scepter is enough. Han Shao actually did not mind the sanctum revivals being free a few times, but since it was a negotiation, he naturally had to fight for it. Ethereal's request for the 10,000 deity scepter was one of the few possibilities he had thought of. Because of the war and other factors, he had already planned to unseal it, so it was perfect to use it as a bargaining chip. The two of them negotiated for a while and quickly reached a consensus. The price was set at unsealing the 10,000 deity scepter and a 30% discount for the next 3 sanctum revivals. Then it's settled. Let me know when you need to borrow the national weapon. Alright, other than that, I might need your help. We'll talk about it when the time comes. Okay. After saying that, Wernos hung up the communication, swift and decisive. Han Shao put down the communicator thoughtfully. This guy is really efficient. He's also very passionate about higher levels, but he's actually so enthusiastic about helping me break through to a new level. Could it be that he wants me to be a lab rat? No matter what he thinks, as long as he confirms that the ethereal national weapon can be used as a stabilizer, the first request will be resolved. This is a good sign. Han Shao revealed a relaxed smile. Fortunately, he had the 10,000 deity scepter as a bargaining chip and had not used it. Otherwise, it would not have been so easy. Chapter 1403. Super Godly Mechanic is out on a business trip. Please wait for a moment. After the content is updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 1404. After finalizing the conditions for lending the ethereal national treasure, Han Shao spent a lot of time calculating the distance of the various Beyonders vestige sensing sources. The result shocked him. He originally thought that all the Beyonders vestige might be in the unexplored area of the universe because it was too far away, so he could only calculate a vague distance. However, he did not expect one of the sensing sources to successfully locate it. It was very close, in the ancient star desert. This surprised him. What he was most afraid of was that all the Beyonders vestige were too far away. Who knew how much time it would take? He was prepared for a long voyage, but he did not expect a pleasant surprise. This way, it would be much easier to fulfill this promotion condition. However, apart from being happy, Han Shao was also very curious about which brother in the Galactic Society had left behind this legacy. After obtaining the location data, Han Shao did not delay and immediately set off for the ancient star desert to find the target. In a desolate universe belt in the ancient star desert. This was a space area without any celestial bodies. A dazzling starlight suddenly lit up in the distance. A hyperdrive stream of light shot over from afar and stopped in this area, revealing Han Shao in his mechanical suit. The location is around here. Speaking of which, there doesn't seem to be anything special here. Is there really no problem with the sensing? Han Shao muttered to himself as he observed his surroundings. He felt that this area was ordinary, and there was nothing worth paying attention to. A normal beyond grade A's perception did not detect anything abnormal. He calmed himself down and activated the Beyonder's vestige. The normal environment around him suddenly changed. A white gauze-like fog appeared out of thin air and slowly changed its shape. It floated and moved slowly, looking very inconspicuous. This is the Beyonder's vestige? Han Xiao was surprised. If not for the fact that his senses were pointing at this fog, he would have thought that he had recognized it wrongly. The appearance of the Beyonder's vestige was very different from what he had imagined. He had thought that it would be more gorgeous. He squinted his eyes and took a closer look. Suddenly, his eyes flickered as he realized that the mist was composed of a very peculiar particle. He had mastered so many techniques, but he had never seen such a particle before. He felt a strange sense of harmony from it, which made him think of the word perfect. It's said that the Beyonder's vestige condenses the life essence, soul consciousness, and core energy of the deceased when they advanced. It's equivalent to transforming everything about this super into this particle and preserving it in this form. Then, this particle form might be the key to a higher level. Han Xiao muttered to himself. As a researcher, he did not immediately touch this Beyonder's vestige. Instead, he first recorded this particle form and stored it in an encrypted database. If anything happened on this trip, he could still study it himself in the future. After doing this, Han Xiao calmed down and let out a long breath. Done. Let me see what's so special about the Beyonder's vestige. As he spoke, Han Xiao extended his hand and tried to touch the target. However, his hand passed through it, as if this ball of light was just a mirage, just an illusion. He raised his brows and tried to use his energy to guide it, but it was still ineffective. This Beyonder's vestige was still unaffected and continued to float on its own. With an experimental attitude, Han Xiao tried all sorts of methods, but the results were the same. Even Bold Explorer did not work. Only then did he finally confirm that there was no way to capture the Beyonder's vestige using normal methods. It seems like even if the external environment changes, the Beyonder's vestige will not be affected. Only living beings in a critical state like me can come into contact with it. Han Xiao found the experience of activating his sensory vision and felt the rhythm of his cells in a critical state. It was quite similar to the feeling of meditation, and his mind kept sinking into the deep sea of consciousness. After a while, Han Xiao suddenly felt a change. It was as if a ripple had bloomed in his body and reverberated throughout his body, bringing about an electric shock at the cell level, forming some kind of resonance. Han Xiao opened his eyes and touched the Beyonder's vestige again. This time, he finally touched the real thing. He felt as if his palm had stabbed into the core of a star, and it was extremely hot. This Beyonder's vestige finally reacted. The light fog wrapped around Han Xiao's arm and climbed up bit by bit. A suction force came from inside, as if it wanted to slowly swallow him. If it was cold and indifferent just now, it was now enthusiastically wrapped around him, not wanting Han Xiao to leave its body. Just as Han Xiao was experiencing this feeling, the Beyonder's vestige seemed to have been stimulated. It suddenly shrank and exploded. A dazzling light instantly gushed out and enveloped Han Xiao. His vision instantly turned into a white world, and he could not see anything else. What's this? Han Xiao suddenly lost his sense of position and immediately tried to retreat. However, he realized that no matter how he moved, he could not walk out of this white world. The white light around him extended endlessly as if there was no end to it. Have I been brought to an alternate dimension? Han Xiao was secretly shocked. His mechanical force activated the king mechanical suit stored in his body and prepared to teleport. However, at this moment, a spiritual body covered in blue light suddenly appeared from the void and floated not far in front of Han Xiao. There was only an outline, and the details of its appearance were covered by the dazzling blue light. It was impossible to see its appearance. What followed was a sigh filled with vicissitudes. "It's finally here. There's a living person?" Han Shao was shocked. His eyes narrowed as he stared at this dark blue spiritual entity. He was shocked. Just as he was about to ask about this person's identity, a terrifying mental attack suddenly broke through his mental barrier and rushed into his brain. At this moment, an intense pain erupted from his brain, shaking the depths of his soul. Han Shao held his head and clenched his teeth. He felt as if his brain had been thrown into a blender. He hurriedly opened the interface and saw that his health was decreasing at an unbelievable speed, and it was still accelerating. The damage notifications popped up like a stream and entered Han Zhao's eyes. He immediately understood the situation. The Beyonders vestige was not so easy to obtain. If he wanted to absorb it into his body, he would have to bear an extremely high burden. While obtaining the inheritance of others, he would also have to accept their debt. According to the different causes of death of the owner of the Beyonders vestige, the type of burden was also different. It was equivalent to the successor having to undergo a test and undergo a weakened version of the malignant mutation. It was the same type of crisis as the owner of the Beyonders vestige when he advanced. The owner of this Beyonders vestige had died during his advancement due to the assimilation of the universe. These remaining soul consciousnesses had already half-merged with the universal consciousness, so it brought about a strong mental burden. The mental attack that contained the universal consciousness was more powerful than any beyond grade a mental attack Han Shao had ever experienced. His health dropped rapidly. At this moment, the spiritual body finally spoke again. "Since the impact has already begun, there's no way to stop it. Either you succeed or you die." Han Shao used all his strength to activate his recovery ability. Enduring the pain, he forced himself to focus and asked, "Who are you?" "I'm just a product of the remaining soul consciousnesses. I'm no longer me. I only have incomplete memories and personalities left, as well as the obsession that supports my existence," the spiritual body said calmly. "You're the predecessor of this Beyonders vestige?" Han Zhao's eyes twitched. He thought that the original owner had completely disappeared, but he did not expect there to still be a remnant consciousness. Could it be that the other Beyonders vestiges were the same? At this moment, the spiritual body shook his head and said, "I died when I was trying to break through to a higher level, but for some reason, I did not completely disappear. I actually continued to exist in this form." So this is called the Beyonders vestige. He did not have an interface like Han Shao, so he did not know the reason. He could not explain what had happened to him, nor did he understand the secrets of the Beyonders vestige. "What's your name?" Han Shao could not help but ask. He was still curious about which beyond grade A this person was in history. "Tertius," the spiritual body replied. Han Shao quickly thought about it and realized that there was no such person in history. "Which era are you from? The exploration era or the galaxy calendar?" "Beyond grade A?" Tertius was confused. "What's that?" Han Shao was stunned for a moment before realizing something. "Have you heard of the 3 universal civilizations? The Red Empire, the Radiant Federation, and the Arcane Church?" Tertius shook his head. "I'm from planet Kree, a universe wanderer. I've never heard of the 3 universal civilizations." Han Xiaoxin's heart skipped a beat. If this part of his memory was not incomplete, then this guy was not a beyond grade A from the explored universe, but a guest from the unexplored universe. The reason why he appeared here was probably because the Beyonders vestige slowly floated over after his death. However, at this moment, Tertius suddenly paused and said thoughtfully, "Wait, I seem to have some impression of the West Sandland civilization you're talking about. I think I've passed by such a star system civilization before." Hearing this, Han Shao could not help but be shocked. West Sandlin was the real name of the Radiant Federation. If what this guy said was true, then he might have guessed wrongly. This guy did not float over after his death, but an extremely ancient existence. He had already been to this area before the rise of the Radiant Federation. Han Zhao's heart sank slightly. After receiving the Beyonders vestige, he had vaguely guessed that this might not be the early iteration, and Tertius' background seemed to prove this guess. At this time, the mental attack passed its peak and finally subsided. Han Zhao immediately felt much better. Although it was very dangerous, he could still withstand it with his tankiness. Han Zhao relaxed a lot. Just as he was about to ask Tertius for more details, he suddenly realized that Tertius' figure had become blurry. Tertius seemed to have expected this and took the initiative to explain calmly, "I was assimilated into the universe and assimilated into it. I died due to the assimilation of the universe. If you can withstand the burden, everything that I left behind will be yours. When you succeed, it will be the day that my remnant consciousness perishes. I died a long time ago. This is also a relief for me. The stairs to a higher level often need the corpses of predecessors. Don't mind it." Tertius was rather open-minded. Hearing this, Han Zhao's expression was a little strange. To him, Tertius was just a stranger who had suddenly popped out. They did not have any friendship, so he naturally would not have any emotions. He only felt that this encounter was a little unexpected. He still had many things to ask this guy in front of him. Furthermore, he suspected that if he absorbed the Beyonders vestige, this remnant consciousness would really disappear. After all, he had to be wary of others. Han Zhao did not completely believe what the other party said. Chapter 1405. Just as he was about to say something, Han Zhao suddenly realized that there was an additional set of coordinates in his mind. It was a mental message from Tertius. Han Zhao looked at Tertius in confusion. "What coordinates did you give me?" Tertius shook his head, sighed softly, and slowly said, "That's right. My hometown is my remaining obsession. Although I was born on planet Kree, I left a long time ago. When I was young, I surpassed all my predecessors, broke all records, and became the strongest person in the entire civilization. However, my civilization could no longer provide me with any help. In order to pursue a higher level of individual strength, I traveled into the galaxy alone for countless years. In my hometown, no one is my match. I'm trying to find someone with the same level as me in the entire universe. I want to learn by analogy and exchange experiences. In my wandering life in the universe, I spent most of my time in the desolate starry sky. I rarely met people, but I also saw strong and weak civilizations. Only when I met powerful supers would I appear. At other times, I would not interfere with the normal development of these civilizations. At that time, I only had the path ahead in my eyes. I wanted to become stronger and stronger. Until the day I died, I did not return to my hometown even once. I have been dead for countless years and have been trapped here. I have no perception of the outside world and have long accepted reality. However, the only thing I can't let go of is my hometown. I have nothing to do here. The only thing I can comfort myself with is the incomplete memories of the past. It is just that my firm pursuit of a higher level and the miraculous experiences of wandering the universe have faded, and my life in my hometown when I was a child has become more and more profound. Back then, I could have chosen to stay and help build my hometown, but I was unwilling to do so. I wandered for a higher pursuit, but now I miss my hometown more and more. So many years have passed, and I don't know how my hometown is doing now. You inherited my Beyonders vestige. If it's convenient for you, I request that you go over and help me take a look. The coordinates I gave you are the location of planet Kree. I hope you can help me take care of them on my account." After hearing his explanation, Han Zhao could not help but raise his eyebrows with a strange expression. Don't you know that it's best not to come into contact with unfamiliar civilizations? You don't know my background, yet you gave me the coordinates of your hometown. Aren't you afraid that I'll bring people to invade? Tertius smiled faintly. You're the only one who came in after so many years. I'm about to die, so who else can I give it to but you? If it's risky, then it's risky. There's no such thing as a sure thing in this world. Otherwise, I wouldn't have risked my life to try and break through to a higher level, which ultimately led to my death. Also, I don't think you're an invader. Coming to a conclusion after only seeing me once is too hasty. Han Xiao shook his head and said, I can help you take a look, but I won't promise you anything. Besides, I don't think a powerful universal civilization needs my help. You misunderstood. My civilization is not particularly developed. Tertius sighed. You were able to withstand the impact of the universe's assimilation. I can sense your strength. On the other hand, I believe you also feel that I'm very powerful. But in fact, when I left my hometown, I was far from this powerful. Back then, it was very difficult for me to destroy a planet. My strength was obtained through constant breakthroughs while I was wandering. The experience I accumulated should have been brought back to my hometown to give birth to more powerhouses. Unfortunately, I died, and these plans were foiled. Hearing this, Han Xiaoxin quickly calculated. From the sounds of it, when Tertius first started wandering, his strength should have been between a high-level calamity grade and an ordinary beyond grade A. The latter was more likely. During his long and lonely journey, he rose to the peak of the beyond grade A realm step by step and felt the existence of a higher level. He had reached this step without any experience or reference, which was equivalent to the pioneer of the path. From the looks of it, Tertius is also a talented person, probably not inferior to me, not inferior to all the genius supers in the history of the three universal civilizations. If what the other party said was true, then the other party's civilization should be like a remote village, not as strong as he had imagined. It was just that they had produced a genius, just like how the Blue Star had produced him. If Tertius returned to his hometown with his experience and comprehension, there might be another civilization with developed individual strength in the universe. Thinking about it this way, the supers who were born in the three universal civilizations were lucky. There were many strong people here, and there were many opponents to spar with. For a small civilization like Tertius, if he wanted to pursue his opponent, he could only go far away and be a lonely Tao seeker. Just as he was thinking, the interface suddenly rang. You have triggered the mission, A Shadow of the Past. Mission Introduction. In order to explore the path ahead, Tertius wandered the universe alone and never returned to his hometown. He hopes that you will go and take a look. Mission requirements. Reach planet Kree. Reward. 200 billion EXP, 1 character summon card. A mission. Han Xiaoxin's heart skipped a beat. He did not know if Tertius was so open-minded and sincere because of his nature, or because he felt relieved and wanted to settle his affairs, or because he had special feelings for his successor. At this moment, Tertius' figure was getting fainter and fainter, almost disappearing. He did not mind and only smiled. Looks like my time is almost up. After so many years of loneliness, I'm satisfied to have someone to talk to at the end of my journey. Han Xiao looked at him silently and muttered to himself. Although it was an accident, the first and last time they met. Originally, Tertius' wandering knowledge was a precious channel to understand more about the unknown civilization, but there was no time. However, at this moment, Tertius seemed to have thought of something and said softly, By the way, let me give you a piece of advice. If one day you encounter a civilization called the World Tree, it's best to run as far away as possible. Han Xiao was stunned, and his expression changed slightly. However, before he could ask for more details, Tertius' figure completely disappeared, leaving behind only a faint sigh. I didn't leave anything for the civilization in my life. What a failure! As soon as he said that, the blue figure in front of Han Shao turned into light particles and disappeared. At the same time, the mental load that was getting weaker and weaker finally stopped. The white alternate space in front of him suddenly collapsed. Han Shao was in a daze and realized that his vision had returned to the main material universe. He was still where he was and had not moved at all. This Beyonders vestige had already merged into his body and was entrenched alone, but it did not have any further reaction with him. Although he had obtained the Beyonders vestige, Han Shao was not very excited. You're only halfway through your sentence. You should have said it earlier if you encountered the World Tree. Han Shao was helpless, but since he was gone, he could only complain. After all, Tertius did not know that they were at war with the World Tree civilization. If the other party had not taken the initiative to mention it, he would not have known that Tertius had encountered the World Tree civilization. It sounds like this guy has seen the aggressiveness of the World Tree before. Maybe they've interacted before. Maybe the World Tree still remembers this guy? Han Shao pondered. Very soon, he shook his head and put this matter aside for the time being. He turned around and studied the Beyonders vestige in his body. This was his main goal. After absorbing the Beyonders vestige, his strength did not change at all. He could only sense its existence at any time, as if he was using his body as a container to store it. This Beyonders vestige should only be activated during the promotion and become a catalyst for the promotion. He roughly guessed that regardless of whether the promotion succeeded or not, this Beyonders vestige would be consumed. This was a one-time use item. The higher stairs require the bones of the predecessors. TSK, turning into firewood, burning yourself to benefit the future generations. No matter what, I owe you a favor. Han Shao exhaled. Although the other party was dead, he still remembered this favor. The next time he revived in the sanctum, he planned to try to revive this guy. However, the chances were very low. Transforming into the Beyonders vestige, he did not know if he had intercepted the information form like the two sisters of the previous generation. Even if he was completely dead now, he might not be able to revive in the sanctum. Han Shao only planned to do his best and leave it to fate. At this moment, Han Shao suddenly thought of something and smiled. Speaking of which, in the explored universe, only this Beyonders vestige is the easiest to obtain. If Wernos reaches this stage one day, he can only sail far away to find other Beyonders vestige. Han Shao was amused. Wernos was so willing to help him advance. Perhaps he wanted him to explore the way, but he did not know that the only promotion material nearby would be missed. Perhaps Wernos did not have a notification from the interface, so he could not dig out the Beyonders vestige, or perhaps he did not enter the critical state and was stuck on the mission. In any case, he was guarding a treasure mountain without knowing, and in the end, he was the first to reach it. Feeling the Beyonders vestige quietly waiting in his body, Han Shao smiled. Although there were some unexpected circumstances, he still obtained a Beyonders vestige in the end. It was smoother than he had expected. It was not in vain that he had gathered so many mascots in the army. This way, the 3 promotion requirements were only left with the simplest one, which was to find 4 handsome guys to help. Han Shao finally relaxed. He then muttered the coordinates of planet Kree that Tertius had sent him and fell into deep thought. There will definitely be risks in rashly coming into contact with an unfamiliar civilization. Although Tertius said that his civilization is not strong, that's all old news. Now that so many years have passed, it might have become a powerful universal civilization. Furthermore, I can't rule out the possibility that Tertius is cheating. After thinking for a while, Han Shao still felt that he had to take a look. With the king, he could come and go as he pleased. Furthermore, he planned to send out his lord's avatar like a mechanic and not take the risk himself. On one hand, He wanted to complete the mission and see what would happen next. On the other hand, he felt that Tertius civilization might be a potential ally and could be pulled over to fight the World Tree together. After all, the World Tree's style and mechanism could be said to be the public enemy of most intelligent civilizations. 2 days later, in the ancient Star Desert, a certain Radiant Federation military base. A multidimensional sky-opening transportation device was slowly warming up, and a Lord's avatar was waiting in the teleportation area. Han Xiao watched from afar from the base outside, followed by a respectful base officer. Han Xiao's face fruit had already reached greater mastery, so there was basically no possibility of being rejected when he borrowed the multidimensional sky-opening transportation device from the Radiant Federation. Seeing the 2 giant mechanical rings of the teleportation device spin rapidly and turn into a halo, Han Xiao could not help but sigh. Your multidimensional sky-opening transportation device is really a convenient invention. As long as you have the coordinates, you can go anywhere in the universe. Indeed, this is the highest technological achievement of our Radiant Federation. The base officer straightened his back and was a little proud. Amazing, amazing. Can you let me bring it back for research? Please don't make things difficult for me. The base officer was stunned and smiled bitterly. Han Xiao smiled faintly and stopped teasing this officer. He activated his Lord's avatar. At this moment, the power of the teleportation device reached its peak. Suddenly, there was a flash of light, and the Lord's avatar disappeared without a trace. Han Xiao's vision turned, and he arrived at the outer space of a planet. In front of him was a dark green giant planet. There were many satellites floating in orbit outside the planet. There did not seem to be any problems on the surface, but with a glance, Han Xiao could tell that these satellites had not been maintained for many years. They had all been scrapped and turned into scrap metal. Vegetation covered the entire surface of the planet. With a cursory glance, he could not see any traces of a civilized city. There were also no life signals. It gave off a desolate feeling of decline. Only a brown metal tower was eye-catching. Looking down from outer space, it was like this planet was wearing a small pointy hat. After converting the proportions, one could tell that this metal tower was extremely huge, reaching straight into the clouds. Its appearance was very rough, like countless metal objects of different shapes piled up together. The structure of the building was loose, like a huge mountain of trash. This is Planet Kree? It seems like something has happened. Han Xiao was thinking when his pupils suddenly shrank. He quickly adjusted his vision to long-range mode, and his vision quickly enlarged. He locked onto a small black dot that was slowly moving halfway up the metal tower. It was a robot with mottled rust all over its body. It was carrying a metal fragment that was several times its size. It was slowly climbing along a steep path toward the top of the metal tower. In Han Zhao's field of vision, this was the only thing that could move. Han Zhao's eyes moved slightly. He controlled the Lord's avatar to descend and land in front of the robot, revealing himself. However, this robot acted as if it did not see him and walked straight past him. When it brushed past him, Han Xiao could even hear the other party repeating the same word non-stop. "Bury it! Bury it!" Chapter 1406. It looks like a low-level artificial intelligence. No, it might also be a body without artificial intelligence and only has basic logical command. Also, its technological level is low and doesn't exceed the upper limit of a star system civilization. Han Xiao watched the robot pass by him. With his knowledge, he could tell the technological level of this robot with a glance. He could not help but fall into deep thought. He raised his hand slightly, aimed at the back of the transport robot, and released a magnetic force from his palm. Buzz! The robot immediately flew backward uncontrollably and attached itself to the Lord's avatar's hand with a clang. It couldn't move, and only its arms and legs in the air could still move. It was like a tortoise whose shell had been grabbed. A few thin blue electric arcs followed the arm of the Lord's avatar like small snakes and quickly swam to the surface of the robot's body. They entered the body through the gaps in the armor and immediately read the current state of the robot. Only the basic functions were still operating with difficulty, and most of the parts were severely damaged and were almost scrap. At the same time, an item introduction popped up on the interface. Han Xiao took a look. 7 to 5 mechanical transportation type, a common bionic robot in the Arthur civilization, a low-intelligence transportation model. It has strong biochemical tendons and engineering mechanical components, a magnetic adsorption device, and simple self-defense weapons. It is often used for ground transportation. Remarks: This machine is produced in Megacorporation's Workshop Number 5 on Planet Kree. Product code: TLV 2144G87M. Good machine, choose Mega. An ordinary transport robot. Han Xiao was curious. His mechanical force invaded the other party's unprotected motherboard chip and quickly copied the logic code and memory logs. The basic code used by the other party was not related to the explored universe, but it was not a problem for Han Xiao. He easily analyzed it one by one and soon understood most of it. Lines of deciphered code appeared in Han Xiao's quantum network vision. He quickly browsed through it and realized that the underlying logic was in the transport robot's code format. It should have had low artificial intelligence, but due to the lack of maintenance for a long time, there were some malfunctions in the data, causing its artificial intelligence to decrease. However, it could barely maintain the operation of the core logic and carry out a long-term order. This order was to bury a special machine, but in the database of a low-intelligence transport robot, there was naturally no detailed description of what this machine was used for and why it was buried. From the data of the transport robot, Han Xiao only knew the appearance and location of the machine. It looked like two pyramids connected at the apex, like an hourglass placed horizontally. Its location was under the metal tower. The memory log, on the other hand, was intermittent. Due to the malfunction, there were a lot of missing information. Even the timestamp was gone. He could only tell the time by the height of the metal tower in the different memories of the transport robot. In the earliest memory file, the height of the metal tower was only about a quarter of the current height. At that time, the robot was already alone. Most of the transport robot's memories were of building this metal tower. The other memories were of searching for spare parts in the warehouse of the abandoned factory, replacing the badly worn parts of its body, and charging. Why does this scene look so familiar? Han Xiao stroked his chin and felt a sense of déjà vu, as if he had seen a similar scene in an old movie in his previous life. Other than these things, there was nothing else of value on this robot. Han Xiao turned off the magnetic device, and the robot fell back to the ground. The metal pieces on its back also fell to the side and fell along the metal tower. The transport robot stayed on the spot for 2 seconds. It ignored Han Xiao and left on its own. It turned around and walked down the mountain, as if it was looking for a new building material, as if nothing had happened. Han Xiao watched it disappear before turning to look at the interface. At this moment, the mission, A Shadow of the Past, had been completed. Han Xiao immediately calculated it. There was a small amount of experience and a Tertius character summon card. The ability was called Mind Purification, and the effect was to expel negative states. It could be used 3 times at most, and it was quite practical. At the same time, a new mission popped up. You have triggered the mission, A Secret of Extinction. Mission Introduction. You agreed to Tertius' request and came to his hometown, Planet Kree, but something seemed to have happened here. Mission Requirements. Find out the reason for the extinction of the Arthur civilization. Reward: 50 billion EXP, 1 awakening point. This civilization is extinct? Han Xiao was stunned. Immediately, he felt that the extinction of the civilization was most likely related to the unknown mechanical device suppressed under the metal tower. However, Han Xiao thought about it and did not care about it. His figure flashed, and he turned into a stream of light. Soon, he stopped at the entrance of an abandoned factory. It was the base camp in the transport robot's memory. This place looked like a large mechanical factory, but it was covered in vegetation. There were dilapidated buildings around it, and they were all covered by dense forests. Han Xiao took a look and waved his hand. A gust of wind blew away the vegetation and dust on the factory door, revealing a sign written in unfamiliar words. This is probably the factory of that Meg corporation, the place where that robot came from. Han Xiao could not understand the words of this civilization and guessed. He strode in and saw the abandoned assembly lines lined up neatly. There were also some unfinished transport robots hanging on them. It looked like they had suddenly stopped working. Han Xiao took a look and realized that all the energy equipment in the factory had been destroyed. The only thing that was still working was a charging station. However, the wires buried underground had been dug out and connected to a small generator that was crudely made. It was not working at all. He had wanted to see if the factory's mainframe had a more detailed database. It would be best if he could find the star map of this civilization's territory. However, the chip components of the factory's mainframe had also been destroyed and could not be turned on. Furthermore, all the data had been wiped out, and he could not find anything. From the looks of it, all the equipment in this factory seemed to have encountered an impact that could destroy electronics and energy devices at the same time. They were all destroyed in an instant. Han Xiaoxin summoned his mechanical army and searched the entire planet. Very soon, he found the wreckage of cities covered by vegetation. All the energy devices were in the same situation. Furthermore, not only was there no intelligent life on this planet, but there was not even a single beast or insect. It was as if all life forms other than plants had gone extinct. In addition, in some of the city residences, there were still bowls and plates on the table, and rotten clothes were scattered on the ground. All these signs indicated that all life on the planet seemed to have disappeared at the same time. What happened? Everyone disappeared overnight. It seems like that transport robot is the only survivor. Han Xiaoxin became more and more curious. He turned around and returned to the metal tower. He wrapped his entire body in the repulsive field and entered the bottom of the tower. He walked forward with large strides, and the pile of metal waste in front of him was smoothly pushed aside, forming a path. Not long after, he walked to the central area. He saw that it was actually a building wreckage that had been crushed by the mountain of trash. All kinds of experimental equipment were scattered around. It seemed to have been a research base. The eyes of the Lord's avatar shot out a scanning light, and he immediately saw that there was a large space underground. It seemed to have been an underground base in the past, but its structure was also crushed by the huge weight above and filled with metal waste. After comparing the scanning light for a while, he finally locked onto the target. The hourglass-like unknown device was crushed in the trash, and it was very difficult to distinguish it. Han Xiao released his mechanical force, and this unknown device was slowly pulled up into his hands. He then left the metal tower and returned to the outside world. Mechanical force seeped into the unknown device, and Han Xiao sensed the internal structure. He realized that he could not understand this technology, and many parts were damaged after being buried for a long time. Han Xiao took a look at the item introduction. Psionic wave launcher, a prototype, damaged, function unknown. Psionic wave? Han Xiao raised his brows, and his imagination ran wild. He had a feeling that the concept of this psionic wave was probably not the same as the psionic wave and psionic impact in the explored universe. He did not know what was going on yet, but he could roughly guess how the Arthur civilization went extinct. Research involving psionic energy had always been extremely dangerous, and many civilizations had died because of it. After thinking for a few seconds, Han Xiao used Bold Explorer on this thing. The last time he used it on the Beyonders vestige, the notification was that the target was ineffective and it did not succeed, so it did not enter the 7-day cooldown period. Buzz. Han Xiao's vision suddenly changed, and he arrived at a research institute. The psionic wave launcher was floating in midair, covered by a transparent container. Pipes were connected to it, and below it was a large pile of instruments. Countless researchers in uniform were busy adjusting the parameters. An officer who looked like the person in charge waved his hand and turned around to say something. The other researchers pushed the lever and activated the switch. Waves of energy flowed into the psionic wave launcher through the pipeline. Not long after, the space on both sides of the hourglass-shaped device began to vibrate faintly. The air was distorted as if there were invisible ripples, but they were confined to a small area. Many of the researchers present were overjoyed when they saw this. However, the next moment, something unexpected happened. The ripples on both sides of the device suddenly broke through the restrictions, and a light blue circular shockwave spread out, passing through the inner wall of the container and quickly sweeping across the entire place. All the instruments exploded with electric sparks, and the energy device was instantly paralyzed. The entire room immediately turned dark. The researchers who were swept by the shockwave were all annihilated in the blink of an eye, turning into ashes without a sound, leaving only empty clothes on the ground. At this moment, Han Zhao's vision suddenly zoomed out, coming to the outer space that overlooked the entire planet. It became a macroscopic view, and he saw a blue shockwave suddenly explode on the surface of planet Kree, quickly sweeping across the entire planet. The brightly lit cities instantly darkened, and countless people turned into ashes without knowing it. No one on the entire planet survived. However, this was not the end. Han Xiao clearly saw that the light blue shockwave that destroyed all electrons, energy equipment, and life forms did not weaken. It spread out into the universe with planet Kree as the center and soon disappeared from sight. He did not know how far it would fly. After seeing this scene, Han Zhao's vision suddenly returned to normal, and the skill effect ended. As expected, it's because of this thing. I thought Tertius was lying to me. I didn't expect his civilization to really not be that developed. He can even destroy himself by researching psionic energy. However, it doesn't seem right to say that their technology isn't good. The psionic wave transmitter they created is probably black technology. Han Xiao fiddled with the device in his hand in surprise. He had watched this video and had a vague guess about the principle of this device. The primordial psionic energy could assimilate, devour, absorb, and transform all kinds of energy. Once it exploded, it would expand endlessly, swallowing everything. However, the psionic wave transmitter created by the Arthur civilization could destroy certain forms of energy without devouring matter and absorb a portion of it to maintain its expansion. A normal primordial psionic energy explosion was a solid energy ball, and this psionic wave was just a ripple. However, there were some things that Han Xiao could not figure out. He did not understand why other substances were not damaged, but life forms would be annihilated. In short, there were still many unknowns about this technology. It seems to have a lot of research value. It might become an important combat technology for me. Han Xiaoxin was overjoyed. He did not have such thoughts on this trip, but he did not expect to gain something. He had an intuition that belonged to a mechanic, and he secretly felt that this psionic wave technology was more powerful than he had expected. The secret of extinction on the interface also showed that it was completed. The normal way should be to look for clues everywhere, but he had Bold Explorer, so he completed the mission directly. The EXP reward did not matter, and one awakening point was better than nothing. However, it was very easy and did not take much effort. Furthermore, the biggest gain was this strange psionic wave technology. Just as Han Xiao was feeling happy, a familiar voice sounded beside him. Stranger discovered approaching the mission target. Permission to use taser guns to subdue him. Han Xiao turned around and saw that the tattered transport robot had returned to the foot of the mountain. It raised its mechanical arm at him, and 2 guns popped out from its wrist. Without a word, it pulled the trigger at Han Xiao. Han Xiao already knew that these 2 rusty guns were useless. They could not shoot anything at all. However, the transport robot did not seem to notice. It continued to pull the trigger in vain. It did not stop, making empty sounds again and again. Han Xiao raised his eyebrows and took a step to the left. The muzzle of the transport robot immediately followed him. He took another step to the right, and the muzzle turned around again, always pointing at him. Looking at the robot pulling the trigger, Han Xiao actually felt that it was a little cute. "Forget it, I won't dismantle you." Seeing that it was not a threat, Han Xiao ignored it. He raised his hand and summoned more exploration-type mechanical soldiers. He waved his hand and asked them to leave. They searched for other planets in this universe to see if there were any survivors of the Arthur civilization. He wanted to find the history of this civilization and the records of Tertius deeds. After all, there were still many unanswered questions. However, he could just let the mechanical soldiers do this for him. He was a mechanic after all, so there was no need for him to do such troublesome things personally. After doing all of this, Han Xiao turned his gaze back to the transport robot. Seeing that it was still pulling the trigger, he could not help but smile. Speaking of which, I wonder what kind of luck this little thing has. It actually wasn't destroyed by the psionic wave. It might be the only survivor of the entire Arthur civilization. Since I promised Tertius to take care of his hometown, I can't turn a blind eye to you. Han Xiao thought for a moment and suddenly released a stream of mechanical force that landed on the transport robot. The other party suddenly froze on the spot, and its appearance and structure quickly changed into a human shape. The rust fell off. At the same time, waves of mechanical particles surged out from Han Xiao's hand and landed on the other party's body. The material of the body was quickly strengthened. Not long after, the changes stopped. The transport robot's appearance had changed drastically. It was covered in silver armor, and its entire body was streamlined. Its body was slender and long, and energy circuits that emitted a faint fluorescent light were faintly discernible on the surface of its body. It was as if it had jumped from a cartoonish style to a hardcore realistic style. "That's about it." Han Xiao nodded and retracted his mechanical force. He had already given life to this transport robot, turning it into a mechanical life form. At the same time, he had greatly improved the other party's body, adding many new functions. He had also stored some complete sets of star system-level civilization technology knowledge into the other party's database. However, he did not rewrite the other party's core logic. He only perfected the other party's intelligence on the original foundation and deliberately did not leave his mark on the other party. With his current ability level, the first-generation mechanical life form that he had personally modified had extremely high performance bonuses, far surpassing the past. Han Xiao did not plan to take this robot away because he owed Tertius a favor. As for whether this robot could grow a new flower of civilization on the ruins of planet Kree after receiving his gift, that was not his concern. Han Xiaoxin looked up at the tall metal tower with complicated emotions. After knowing the situation, this metal tower seemed to have a special meaning. In his eyes, this metal tower that looked like a wonder building seemed to have become a tombstone of civilization. The advancement of technology is also the advancement of disaster. Han Xiao sighed and glanced at the transport robot one last time. Only then did he change into the king and disappear with the psionic wave transmitter. The transport robot did not seem to have noticed anything. It stood there in a daze for a long time before finally coming back to its senses. It lowered its head and looked at its body that had changed drastically. It seemed very confused. The electric current of the motherboard seemed to have ignited a spark of thought. It muttered to itself in a low voice, "What am I?" You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.